call the meeting to order. Seeing as it is September 11th, we'll take a little bit extra in our week.
Yes.
A little bit of silent prayer and confession. Or reflection, sorry.
I said confession.
You want to confess, Pat?
At the church.
You don't have the right collar.
Let me go get one. Carrie, will you call the roll, please?
Kathy Cox?
Here.
Pat Rooney?
Here.
Nicole Cohen? Here. John Maston?
Here. Please stand and join me in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I will entertain a motion to review and accept the agenda.
I make a motion we review and accept the agenda.
Second.
Nicole Cohen?
Yes.
Kathy Cox?
Yes.
Pat Rooney?
Yes.
John Maston?
Yes. Now we are going to review the proposed September 18th, 2018 board meeting agenda. Superintendent Sire.
Thank you, Mr. Mazda and members of the board. Starting with the consent agenda. Our first item is, as always, our minutes for the previous meetings. We have our regular session from the 21st of August, a special session from the 23rd, the executive session from the 23rd, and the work session from August 14th. For any questions on the minutes? 4.1.3 is the personnel report. We have had some late resignations. Four 4.1.4 is our gifts and donations. Four 4.1.5 is out-of-state travel. We do have two requests on this agenda. Thunderbolt Middle School Travel Club. This will be to Miami and Key Largo, Florida in June. That is after school is out. And then Lake Havasu High School Digital Communications. They're looking to take students to the journalism convention, the national convention, which is in October in Chicago, late October, early November. The students would miss, I believe, 3 days of school.
So I have a question on the travel for the middle school, because I've had two parents call me on the middle school travel.
Okay.
So is this in place of the DC trip? So why are we changing it?
I do not know the answer to that. I can find that out.
Okay.
I believe that it is in case it's their, the travel club, they only do one trip a year, so
Right.
I believe that's it.
But the parent was concerned because the DC trip was, of course, something that's educational and all the museums are free for the kids, and the direct quote that, or the question she said is, why in the world would I want my kid going out on a midnight walk in Miami with alligators around? Like, what educational purpose does this trip have?
So I talked to the advisor from this club because I had taken kids at the high school level, and so this is around science and ecology. And they've done this trip before, it's the same company, and so her thought was that they would kind of go back and forth between the history focus and the science focus because the kids were really doing the same thing every single year. So the kids were doing, instead of going 7th grade and 8th grade to the same place, and there was some negativity when the kids were going to New York City, and she didn't want to bring them back to New York City, kind of going back and forth between the two was what she shared with me.
What was the negative?
About New York. So,
Yeah.
and then when my experience with traveling with kids is they don't actually like traveling in New York. It's really hard to travel with a bus full of kids in New York City.
Oh, okay.
DC is really easy to travel with kids, but New York is not easy at all to travel with kids. It's all day long. You just don't really ever have a stopping point because the city's so bustling. And so she didn't want to go back to that
okay.
again.
Okay.
So the trip was, it historically been 7th grade and 8th grade both go? Okay, maybe I just put the
Yes.
two together since they were both DC. All right. So 42 kids, that's $100,000 to go on a trip, and I understand the district's not paying for it, but every time we look at all these fundraising activities, it's coming from our community. So I don't know if it's worth talking about whether or not it's necessary for, 7th grade, 8th grade, there's travel opportunities every year from 7th grade on. Are we going to push it down to 6th grade? Our 5th graders going to be, you know what I'm saying? So it's a lot of money for a trip, and I read that it was around science, but we haven't even adopted the new science standards. Those aren't even coming before the state board until October. So I just wonder, I understand why people would want to have their kids go on a trip to DC, but when you start looking other places in the country, it seems like those opportunities could be provided here. And I was just curious what all that they would be doing now that I've heard the Midnight Walk with Alligators story. I don't know how true that, I don't know if that's in fact what they're doing, but that's what I was told, so.
Certainly can get some additional information and I'll send it out to the board.
Okay, thank you.
In section 5 is old business, and so the policies that were read at the first reading last meeting are coming back, and there are no changes with the exception of the one that was made on page 2 of the student wellness policy, where we actually, I'll tell you that page number. Sorry, can you write it down? On page, it's not there, that's not. So we redid the page. It's the page
21.
after page 19, 20 would be page 21 in your packet, and we have deleted item D as it didn't appear to be necessary to that policy. So that is the only change since the last reading.
On the page 24, on the walking or biking to school to promote physical activity, was there any discussion with the city, with the whole bike path and all that having to do with our schools?
I actually, in a former life, have been very active in pursuing that. I was on the Trails Committee with the city and actually worked with the MPO quite a bit to lay out bike paths and look at sidewalks and those types of things. The city has started their process, but it's going to be a lengthy process. There's quite a bit to strike and quite a bit to do. And their approach, from what I understand, is going to be more of what grant money is available, what matching money is available. The start of that you're going to see is Swanson. Swanson is scheduled to be completely overhauled, gutted, and redone with bike lanes. So that's coming. They did take a very extensive look at sidewalking around our schools, and the proposal that came forward from the Metropolitan Planning Organization to the city, which is the plan, is to selectively go through and reinforce sidewalks, install bike lanes on major arterials. From what I have seen, it's a very good plan. It's not just because I was involved, but there are engineering firms involved, federal government involved, committee from the city and the county involved to put all that together. So that's coming.
And the city does invite us when they do the reviews of the bike routes. We have had district principals participate in the past. I don't think that has been a regular process, have it?
Oh, one more thing, sorry. The community use, the district shall encourage, I'm sorry, same page 24. Community use, district shall encourage community access to and use of our facilities. So after attending that wonderful first and last game, I'm just not a football person. I'm so sorry. Go Knights! But it's a great facility, but that's not addressed. And I know we've talked about it, so I wonder if we're going to talk about it,
Yes.
how we're going to talk about it, when we're going to talk about it, because I've also
We
had-
actually, Mr. Murray has put it on our director's agenda for next week since he's out this week, so we already have that item to discuss and then bringing back what our policy will be as a recommendation to the board. They were waiting primarily for completion for training on what the uses, appropriate uses for the field were, and then we have already received a request for soccer use on that field, and so we do need to bring that back sooner rather than later. This is our second presentation of the staff bereavement leave. Again, this was a technical change to make sure that the language is clear to staff. And then 5.3, this was our district philosophy definitions. So the change from the last meeting was to remove the word doctrines. And then in this particular change, what was suggested at the last meeting is on page 3 of 3, that we revise, actually 2 and 3, that we revise the definitions that were included under liberty to reflect Black's Law Dictionary definitions. And so those have been inserted. And then the other recommendation was to delete from following democracy. And so this is what was discussed at the last meeting and the changes that have been brought forward to review.
Is it possible for us to pull a Black's Law definition from the meeting on socialism?
Yes, it is possible.
Hey, Jamie, can I ask you a question? You know, at our last meeting, when this was all coming up, and I asked about the question of the citizenship test. Do they do a pre-test on that? They don't?
No. I used to use it as a pretest, like for fun, and now it's a requirement. The reality is the kids are able to pass it.
Oh, I know. I mean, I know all about it.
But-
You know, you can take it.
But
as many
they're
times
able
as-
to pass it.
But I think it would be real interesting sometimes with kids that are coming in that have come out of U.S. history and stuff like that, because that seems to be something that comes up here periodically. How many of those kids walk in and really understand a lot more than we're giving them credit for before they ever, take the test for graduation.
Yeah, and right now they take the test very early on in their senior year. They can take it as early as 8th grade. We just elected not to do 8th grade because of the tracking of that data all the way through high school.
Yeah, I just wondered that, as a former social studies teacher, because, you always hear this, kids don't understand U.S. history, they don't understand our government. And I just wonder if the kids coming in, that if you had a pre-test and you took that, do they really understand a lot more than the critics give them credit for? And then of course give them the post-test, which they have to graduate. I just wondered, I'm not saying that needs to be done, but as a teacher, I would, if I heard stuff like that, I would definitely be doing something like that.
So your comment about adding the definition of socialism, my comment in answer to that, it's hard to say this in a way that's understandable, but I'll try. Apparently, I think the entire board thinks that republic is a positive word. The entire board does not think democracy is a positive word. I haven't asked any of you what you think of socialism. I would think that you think it's a negative word. Well, since I think democracy is a negative, I think democracy is a positive word. I think republic is a positive word. So putting socialism, which most people in this community think of as negative, in a list with 2 positive words is confusing. But if you don't like democracy, I guess it's kind of like I like republic, I don't like democracy that much or not at all, and I really don't like socialism. I think sticking it in here is confusing.
I don't. And the reason why I don't is for a couple of reasons. This is not a student-facing document. This is a public-facing document. That's the first thing. Second thing is that in order to have a conversation or to have a set of words on a page, we have to all know what those meanings are. And so when we boil this down, we hear a lot in today's society about liberty and freedom and republic and democracy and socialism. They're all over the news. It would be very nice to know when we say what a responsible citizen is, what our definitions are that back that up, and how the conversation unfolds against our mission statement. And that's really what this is. This isn't how we teach a child in a classroom. This is what we mean by the word responsible citizen.
Well,
and so if you're going to have an honest conversation about that, especially in a world where a comedian like Jim Carrey can go out on TV, and this just happened, and say, I'm in favor of socialism, let's get this done right now, what are we waiting for? We really need to know what that really means.
okay.
And in relation to what a responsible citizen is.
And you had mentioned before that you are concerned that you know students who are now in favor of socialism, and I can see your concern.
It's not just my concern
No, I know
because
that.
I know students. It's my concern because I sit there and I watch that we have students and people in our society. And again, it's an outward-facing document. It is not targeted at students.
Okay. Well,
But knowing that if you took a survey that almost 50% of the population you surveyed today would say that socialism is just acceptable and fine, that's a cause for a general
Okay.
concern.
All right.
And we have to start defining what it is we're talking about.
All right.
I mean, we really do. I can say blue, and if you say, well, that's not blue, that's this other color, then we don't agree on our definition of blue. And to define something is just to simply say, this is what it says, and to use a Black's Law definition, which is the legal definition of the word, I think once you get there, I think you're
Could you
starting
read
to
the
frame.
definition, Black's Law? Do you have it in front of you?
I don't have the socialism one. But
Okay.
we agreed that all of these other ones from Black's Law were fine for everything else. And Black's Law would be the one you would use in a court of law.
Well, I still go back to the traditional meaning of socialism, of the government owns or controls the means of production and distribution, which we do not. I mean, that's, and now you would have to review with me what Black said.
I can read it for you.
Okay.
Like, I do have it from the last meeting. And it says a schema or form of government aiming at absolute equality in the distribution of the physical means of life and enjoyment. It is on the continent employed in a larger sense, not necessarily implying communism or the entire abolition of private property, but applied to any system which requires that the land and the instruments of production should be the property not of individuals but of communities or associations or of the government.
Okay, well, I'm not sure your democratic socialist countries in Northern Europe own the means of production and distribution. They, for example, with healthcare and that kind of thing, they certainly control that. But I mean, that almost sounds favorable. If you don't like socialism, part of it sounds favorable. If we're going to do that, I think that we must include oligarchy, and then we must include anarchy. And those are the three big ones.
Okay.
Oligarchy's really, really big.
If you want to include them, let's include them.
Okay, that's fine with me.
You know, I wonder, Diana, since you mentioned the continent, I guess we could throw in the Great Britain and all that. They don't exactly own the farms and stuff like that. They do a lot of stuff that is socialism, and that they, you know, health care and stuff like that. But you know what, in this country? Social Security, where the government steps in and provides that for people. And there are a lot of other examples of that. You know, I just think if I was going to put anything in there that was an economic thing, it would be capitalism. Because in our country, that's what we believe in. And I mean, if we're going to emphasize that particular system. And then we get into this idea of that these governments are all controlling. Well, you know, they don't control Volkswagen as far as those are private enterprise things. Mercedes-Benz, all these other companies, and you blur things there because there are degrees. And sure, you know, if you went along, if you looked at what Mussolini brought into Italy, where it was really government control of everything, that's an extreme form. If you look at communism, that's an extreme form, where they have the collectives and all that other stuff. But those countries in Western Europe, many of them, most of them are democracies where people are elected, and the people that are elected have decided this because it's the will of the people.
Right.
So if I was going to put anything in, and actually years ago, and I was the first teacher of it in our district, it was free enterprise. This was way back, I don't know if it was the late 70s or early 80s. I think it was the late 70s. The state legislature mandated that free enterprise be offered to students as a graduation requirement, a semester. And the concern was that young people didn't know the distinction between government, you know, the democracy, or if you are democratic republic or whatever you want to get hung up on, and the economic system we had. And they're two different things. And so if you really wanted to emphasize something that is very much American, it would be that you put capitalism in there. And then what would happen is kids at another time, they could see this. This is what we believe in this country. This is the comparison. And that's what should get taught, or they should understand when they walk out of school. Hopefully they understand that.
No, but socialism, as much as, and the rest, as much as we see them as economic, those economic models are also government models. They're political and they're economic in one
Well, you're
hybrid.
elected, but these people are elected. In other words, they get, it's like Parliament is elected. All these people are elected, and it gets, they've decided for whatever reason that they should offer all of this stuff to the public, because evidently their public thinks that. We as Americans think, hey, it's through your hard work and all that you acquire these type of things. So it isn't a matter of all of a sudden this is some scheme. It's I look at it right now. Donald Trump, he said he's going to charge tariffs, and then no sooner does he do that than they're going to offer farmers subsidies. Now, if you don't think that is an example of the government coming in and doing something, you can get this whole thing mixed up.
I don't disagree, but when I go back and I look at my history, the USSR was the United Soviet Socialist Republic. It was a form of government.
Yeah.
They used a Marxist form of economic enforcement with them. You can have socialism without Marxism. Usually they follow one another around to some degree, but we completely rejected that. We fought long and hard against that, and here we are having a political debate about putting a definition link on a website. I just think in the current political climate, it would be helpful to let people out there know what the topical thing is. I don't see the harm in it.
Okay. Then I put them both in.
Sure.
So what I have written down is to add socialism, oligarchy, anarchy, and capitalism.
Did you say anarchy?
Yes.
I'm okay with that.
I'll bring back with those definitions.
I thought we were through with this.
I did too.
Well, I said
Starting to be like,
I
like
asked
it's
for
a mess
definition,
room.
not for.
so like, starting to remind me of the EBP.
Okay.
Okay.
Back to the definition. So, and Jamie pointed this out, and thank you for pointing that out. Under rights, first of all, I want to point, did you change it?
Right.
Did you make any changes?
We did, I apologize.
Oh, okay.
The last one was life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness?
No, not that one.
No?
The responsibilities?
Anyways, this was not,
Fruits of your labor.
this was a placeholder, and I pulled all these rights off the White House website. And so,
The one with property?
Jamie, no, not with the one with,
Right.
that was
Right,
that
privacy.
was mine.
Right to privacy.
Dr. Sherwood, government
I apologize for interrupting you.
That's okay.
The right to
The
employment.
privacy and employment. But, so anyways, I don't know if we want to talk about these now or if we want to talk about these Tuesday. But anyways, that whole list came from the White House and it was a copy-paste job. So it was not something that I put a lot of thought into when I submitted. I was trying to have a placeholder for the rights that we should list as examples. And so thanks, Jamie.
Well, I mean, we have to define,
There is no right to privacy. I mean, we have a Fourth Amendment that's violated every single day,
so,
thousands of times a day.
The right from unwarranted, you can take the word privacy out. Because we have a right from unwarranted government intrusion.
Do we?
Without a warrant, yes. Yes. Unless there's a FISA court involved. there's a secret warrant.
That's fine with me. But when I think of rights, I do think of rights provided to us by the Bill of Rights. And so
Right.
I appreciate your making that distinction, Nicole, and that would be fine.
Well,
But
thank Jamie, because she's running it out.
get rid of your privacy.
We didn't get that far in our discussion last time,
No.
so.
So do you want to take a minute? Because I can bring it back next week with the revisions.
If we
Well-
and now we give ourselves a moment.
Okay.
What's
We're
that?
going to have a full plate with presentations. So if we do it now, we save ourselves a minute to do it.
Let's do it now.
So on leaving out privacy from and the right to unwarranted, right to,
Just the privacy.
we don't have a right to.
Right from.
Right
from.
Sorry.
Mhm.
That still doesn't make sense to me.
Right, no.
I get rid of the federal employment one altogether. That just seems.
There's no right to employment.
Right.
Due process? There's no due process in there?
Well, you don't really have that
I know.
right anymore because of the Patriot Act, right?
Just trying to think of things to add.
So maybe on the right one bothers me on unwarranted government intrusions. Maybe it's a freedom from unwarranted.
Oh, I think you're right.
Sure.
Sounds good.
Anything else on that?
So we took the right to apply for federal employment.
Right, I took that off. And then rephrase the freedom from unwarranted government intrusions.
Anything else?
All right, moving into the new business. The first item in new business is the approval of the sole source for anatomy and clay. So Horrocks Systems is the sole source for anatomy and clay learning system. And this is a system that is being purchased for the anatomy courses in order to provide the anatomical, muscular and skeletal system replication, and that would be an alternative to the CAT dissection that has been going on for years. CATs are expensive and increasingly unavailable. That's what this item is. Item 6.2, this is a request to amend the agreement with our vocational education district, WAVE district, and Havasu district. This amendment is coming forward actually for a couple of reasons. One is that it was last renewed in 2016, and it was intended to be an annual renewal. And so this extends our renewal through July 30th of 2019. Let me rephrase that. It was as a 5-year agreement, but it was supposed to be revisited annually. And what this also does is make some changes, technical changes to make it more accurate in terms of the responsibilities for the bus and the payment of the bus that was purchased that way.
I have a question about that. On page, on the third page, it says that the satellite, that is our school district, is leasing a bus. Is this a second bus?
No, this is the same CTE bus, and I actually thought that we had purchased that bus. We're purchasing it. So that might be in my question as far as the leasing.
It almost sounds like it's a second bus.
Yeah, no, it's not. It's the same bus.
It says 5 payments, so
So this is the same bus that on the.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yes, ma'am.
On the out-of-state trip that will be taking the journalism students up to the airport in Vegas. This is the same bus?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. We have one CTE bus.
Okay. And then what do we do to transport the CTE students who will still be here back and forth from Wade facility?
We'll use, just on that day when the bus is gone, we use our own buses. So, part of our agreement allows us to use the bus when it's not being used, and then when it is being used, we just provide for our students and stuff. And we did have Tasker review all of these minutes. All right, 6.3, this is the first presentation of revisions to the crowdsourcing gifts and donations policy. And so we did have this discussion about crowdsourcing and had made some amendments to that policy in 2016. So what I've brought back for this particular meeting for discussion is the KCD actual policy and the exhibit. There's 2 exhibits, so it's the first exhibit. So the actual policy remains the same. That's our general policy about gifts and donations. And so we had inserted a paragraph about crowdsourcing. It's about halfway down the page. Then when you actually look at the exhibit A, the information that was provided here gives a little bit more definition specific to crowdsourcing. And based on the conversation that the board had, what I'm proposing for discussion today is deleting the scenarios because they really are not appropriate for how we evolved in the use of crowdsourcing. And then I just put down 3 bullets that I kind of gathered from the conversation. So these were starting points for the direction that the board wanted to see. So I added crowdsourcing is not intended to replace core materials and supplies that are considered part of the items necessary to fulfill our obligations for a free and appropriate public education. And basically that means the core as we would provide to every student. Any items that would supplement the board adopted curriculum must be approved by the Director of Educational Services. Staff, that would be prior to coming to the superintendent for approval. And then the third item that I gathered from the conversation was that staff shall include a comprehensive rationale for the need of the items requested. And then our plan was we didn't bring back the actual form, although that form needs revising. We would rather revise it after we finalize the intent in the crowdsourcing language in this particular policy.
I really like this layout a lot better. I have a brother and sister that teach up in Clark County. And my sister found herself in a position where she would teach at large, which would be what we would do here. Up there, she had that quasi-administrative role. And found herself needing to go back into a 3rd grade classroom after several years. She floated some crowdsourcing to re-equip her classroom. So paper, pens, the black, or the, not the blackboard, but the bulletin board stuff that she needed and so on. She had some math books that she wanted and so on and so forth. I was happy to contribute to her campaign because she was not replacing anything that was going to be a district-based item or should have been a district-based item against core curriculum. She was bringing in supplemental materials, no different than an elementary school teacher who's buying scholastic books for her classroom would be adding a supplement to her own personal library for the kids to read inside the classroom. So I kind of look at that, and as long as we're not violating that core of what the district should supply, and so, you know, you look up here and they've got microscope, or you could say Chromebook or laptop, or you can come down with a list, or gosh, I really like this textbook better, or this curriculum piece over here is better. We shouldn't be standing up anything that would be that core of what we teach in a classroom. It's all the peripheral stuff. So if you've got a teacher who's got a style that requires X, and it's not something that the district would normally provide to a classroom, then I don't necessarily see a problem with that. And again, I mean, you could hear a teacher make an argument based on what I just said that, well, I really need Chromebooks. Okay, but why isn't the district supplying that to you? Why is that not coming from a district resource? Why hasn't that gone through the Educational Services Department and IT? And why are we circumventing the entire system in order to equip this one classroom when, you know, this one classroom at, say, Jamaica gets it and this one over at Havasupai doesn't? You know, we need to provide an equal basic level of supply and educational material to each classroom, and then let the teacher's style determine the balance of it.
And I think out of that original conversation, part of what we are going to be working on this year, and it is going to take a process, is identifying what are the basic things that every classroom should be equipped with. Mm-hmm. And actually having that list so we can say, yes, this is a basic entitlement and it's part of what we offer to all of our children. Any thoughts or comments on that?
Can I say something? Going along with that, then it would be helpful as a teacher to maybe get a list of, this is what you can expect the district to provide you, this is how you go about to request it. Because there are those needs that we don't necessarily, we've been told no because there's been no money for so long. That we stop asking.
Right, but what we need to do, in fairness to you, what we need to do is we need to be able to say to a teacher, this is the loadout for a third grade classroom, this is the loadout for a high school science class. This is what the district is going to provide in this situation. And we haven't done that, and we should be doing that. We should be looking at that on a regular basis based on changes in standards and curricula and on down the road, because the resource materials is really what we're talking about here. The resource materials are important, and we should as a district be looking at that and saying this is what we can provide.
So to answer the question, that's what we're trying to work on for this year, is to develop that list.
Thank you.
Yes.
So we do have Crane.
I'm sorry, who are you?
Carol Nonkowski. Thank you. With Crane that we utilize as a resource, in there's manipulatives that it suggests to you, which we don't have. And so I know, since you brought up your sister, she had two that was going. One was for classroom supplies, but one was for the math manipulatives. And so,
And I look at the classroom supply part of that, and I actually favor that model a lot more than the math manipulatives.
Right.
Just because her district should be supplying her with the math manipulatives.
Right. That's for you and I, yes. We did one, I did the
I did supplies, she did the manipulatives.
Yes. So, but so that's the question. It's like we have purchased Crane. Inside of Crane, K8, it suggests what manipulatives that we are supposed to be using to teach the standards. And we may or may not have those on our campuses.
Well, and I think this is a great exploration point from within the district to make sure that we are getting this part right. I think a lot of our angst is we have lived without the financial resources that we really need for so long, and now that they're coming back online, we need to start being smart and laying out this is what we need. You know, and it's a double-sided argument, because not only have we gone to the state and said we're not getting what we should get for money, but we can't tell ourselves internally what we should have in the classroom, so how do we even start to benchmark what we should have for money?
Well, and as I shared with you, when we got rid of Daytona and moved 6th grade to elementary, 6th grade lost that department funding. So when we were at the middle school, we had department funding. So for science, everybody did the frog dissection. But then when we went to 6th grade, that department funding ended. They stopped asking us. They stopped funding. And that was 8 years ago. So that's why we crowdsourced for frogs.
And I think part of that discussion truly is, first of all, going to be just basic things like you need a table and a chair for every kid. But the other piece that we have to go down the pathway of is what is core and what is supplemental. And if it's core, it should be provided to your classroom. And if that content requires that in order to teach those standards, then that becomes a core item. So I'm not sure we're going to get there by the end of this year, but that is the process that we're starting, the pathway. So.
Name?
Megan Ulmer.
Thank you.
Just a question, I understand all of this, but what if it is something that we go through the process and it is core and the district can't supply? Would that be something that then would be approved through crowdsourcing? Like if we go through the proper steps and the money's just not there, but it is something we need?
That's a really great what if.
Yeah, I'm curious, do you have anything in mind? Okay, I'm just wondering, do you have anything
Nothing in mind right now, but I know it'll
but-
possibly come about, and I just didn't know.
I think this is something that's going to evolve in the next 6 to 8 months, and I think as we start to unpack this, we'll get a much clearer path. We're at the policy section of it, and so what we want to do is we want to set up a really good policy that says this is what the framework looks like, and then we start with a classroom loadout beyond that, and then we can really start to assess. And if we're really missing something that we can't provide for, then that's a great point of discussion. And how do we get that? Do we crowdsource it? Do we go to the public? But there's got to be a process, a procedure, a form. It's got to be logged into district inventory against that classroom. And then I think, once we get all those pieces in place, we can immediately answer that what if. But today,
No, I knew there would, I was just.
Starting with the policy, that's a lot tougher.
Nicole Todd, a couple of points. As somebody who has crowdsourced around $10,000 for equipment, that none of it is in my current classroom right now because I'm doing reading intervention, and so I've left the materials behind, gladly. It's frustrating to hear this conversation, not because you're saying the district should provide it, because these materials should be provided. I agree, they should, but they weren't for a very long time. And one of the things that I've earned is 30 Chromebooks for my 6th grade classroom so that I can utilize Google Classroom, which is something that as a district we do have access to, and I don't know, does that cost money through the district? No, but it is an incredible resource, and especially in 2018 when we're trying to prepare kids for a computer-based college, truly. Anyways, the Chromebooks especially, well, first of all, I feel like all along the way it's felt like I've done something wrong when I should have been told thank you for doing that. Like, this is a great thing that you did for our district. But the Chromebooks, especially hearing that sounds like you're wanting it to be a no-go for people to crowdsource. Are they going to be provided?
So let me answer this, because I'm the tech guy up here. And I pick on Chromebooks because it seems like we're asking for Chromebooks. First and foremost, I want to thank you for looking out for your students in the way that you feel is best for them. I think that's something that it's really something I think we can value in our teachers. I don't think that there's a teacher in this district. I don't think that there's an administrator or somebody on the board that sits there and thinks, gosh, let's hold somebody fully accountable because they went out and got a Chromebook. But when we start talking about procurement, which is really what we're talking about, and we go outside our normal procurement channels, we really have to have a policy and a procedure to do that. And it's the circumventing of any type of a channelization that would bring those in, account for them, log them into inventory. And the fact that we are going out to our community, which we dearly love the support of our community, but when we just ask them for $5 million in IT funding that we've spent on servers and Wi-Fi canopies and infrastructure things,
But
don't take,
technology in the classroom.
if I can finish. Well, we've got computer labs that are coming online. We've actually put some of this out. We had enough, and my question was to the tech department when we put the bond together, while I was on the Citizens for Havasu Schools Committee, is there enough money in here to replace every computer in the district? And the answer was yes, because the very first place you start in a tech rollout or in an upgrade is let's replace and let's account for what we have. So that was mission one. Now when it comes to Chromebooks and it comes to Google Classroom and it comes to access and device and so on and so forth, is there a place for that in a modern classroom? Yes, there is. There has to be. We allow our kids to do this on cell phones though. We allow them to bring a tablet to school if they
And I
want
have
to.
a problem with that.
Well,
I'd much rather it be on the Chromebook that I have set up, that they go to the site that I have designated, than having their phones in
okay,
my
but
classroom.
where do you get the authority to procure the Chromebooks for the district? Are you seeking something from a principal or from educational services? Was there a form you filled out to get
Yeah,
permission for
I
that?
had it approved.
Okay.
I can
And as long as you're following the process,
I
I
mean,
don't
I
have a
understand
problem
the
with it.
process, and I understand the tech department needs to kind of have a heads up and know, here's what's coming in, here's where it is located, this is
Well,
what, because
as-
the
as-
items
as-
belong to the district.
As somebody who does tech, you need a little bit more than just a heads up. There's a
Okay.
planning
Choice
and
of words on
deployment
my
process
part,
that
but-
goes with any piece of technology you put into any enterprise environment, including the school district.
Okay, and I'm agreeing with that part. What I'm saying is they still need to be approved and allowed in the classroom.
But we're
I use those for AZ Merit.
But as
We have one lab.
as a board member, when I go out onto Donors Choose, and I see that our district has staff that have been out procuring things, but the superintendent is not even aware of that are procuring, and the policy in place says that the superintendent is the one that has to sign off as the final authority on these things. I start to wonder if we haven't lost control of the policy and the process. And if we've lost control of that, you're going to have some consternation from the board, because we're the ones that are saying this is how we would like this done in the form of a policy, which is then rolled out into the exhibit, which is the form, and the procedure that says that form has to be countersigned by the superintendent. If she doesn't know, that's a big problem.
But we have that policy in place right now?
We do, and we're revising it.
Okay.
And so that's what this is a
Okay.
revision process. Yeah.
Okay.
And so
I'm
it
not
was,
arguing the process.
It's, are you gonna say no to if we do a crowdsourcing? for
I don't say yes or
Chromebooks?
no to anything. That's the beauty of this. The board doesn't say yes or no, you can have Chromebooks or not. What the board is saying is here's a process, here's a policy, here's how this is going to lay out, and then we hand it to the superintendent. The superintendent sets the ball in motion,
I get to say no.
here's your form, here's what you would like to get. It comes back, it's a yes or no, and it's a go or a no-go.
And you start with the principal, and
Right. So are Chromebooks going to be considered core materials, or are they going to be considered supplemental?
We don't know that yet.
Well, yeah,
That's a matter of the process that we're going through right now. So will there be some sort of technology identified for each classroom? Will it be to the degree of class sets of devices for students? Don't know the answer to that yet.
In the meantime, what are people going to be allowed to?
We have a policy in place already.
Well, I think that it needs to be stated, first of all, Chromebooks and technology and utilizing those resources was never officially approved by the board. And it is a form of curriculum. When you're going out to a website and you're using content, that's a curriculum, even if it is supplemental. And the Google Classroom, I have gone through, I have never seen where Google Classroom was approved in our district. I have serious issues with Google. Did I miss something? I'm sorry.
I don't know why. I don't understand how it's not approved because it all came from the district.
Okay, well, I don't know where it came from in the district, but it didn't come through the formal process is what I'm saying. And there are concerns with Google, big concerns, in my opinion. Google just refused to testify in a congressional hearing. And this is a problem. The technology is a concern, and I'm sorry if you don't understand it. I'm not trying to...
No, don't talk to me like that. It's not a not understand.
I'm sorry. I'm not talking to you in any certain way, and I expect as a board member not to be cut off by a staff member telling me how to talk to them. And I'm really sorry. That's not your job to tell me that.
Well, actually, I'm an individual who can ask you to speak respectfully to me. And telling me I'm sorry you don't understand that, I'm saying I do understand.
Okay, all right. This is not the topic. The topic is not respect. And I can certainly understand Mrs. Cohen's frustration as I can understand yours. So if we can please get back on track with the discussion.
I just have a quick question.
Wait.
This is a board discussion.
This is a board discussion.
We're not allowed to.
I didn't say that.
I'm
I'm going to recognize Mrs. Nowakowski, who has been patiently waiting.
There's two forms on the all shared drive. One is a gift and donation. One is what I understand is to be a tech. And when I spoke to my administrator and my AA, they said from the district office that the tech form is only to be filled out for tech. So if we were looking for, I don't know, mirrors for the art room to do, would that go under gift and donation? Would that be, I mean, can we get some clarification?
Right. This form, the exhibit is not included today. The exhibit goes through what the donation request is, and then if it's tech, there's some additional things, and then there's also a separate tech form, which is part of why we're cleaning all of this up.
Because if you click the online link, it's the top part you fill out, and then it says tech only. So I think that's where the confusion is that form just tech only, or is that form, we fill it all out, and then if it's tech only, we continue?
Keep going, that's correct. Okay. But it's confusing,
That was,
and so, yeah.
That was the question at our site.
Probably get us down to one form by the time you're done.
And then to speak upon the tech piece, we do have K-12 technology standards. We're supposed to. Just like I have math standards, and I have science standards, and I have ELA standards. Nicole and I have talked about those standards. So like my students, the sixth graders, when they leave, they're supposed to be able to, one, write a 3-page report in one sitting. 2, they are supposed to be able to do a PowerPoint or a slide. There are things that they are required to do as a sixth grader based on Arizona State standards.
Right.
So,
but I think what we're saying here is we're going to be kind of in this period where we're revising this, and as we go through and do this revision period, it's not going to get better. But we want to go through this revision period. We want to come out with something that's a lot more clear to staff, and that we have a much better form for, and that we can actually have the controls in place to do this the right way, and actually being able to say this is what you should have in your classroom, and can we provide the core or can we not provide the core, and so that we all have a good, clear understanding of where we actually sit. We do each other a disservice going past one another in here in our conversation, and we don't even have that in place. I mean, where's the line? What's this? What's that? We're just starting the start of policy formation here on this, and so we want to make sure that by this time next year that we don't have these discussions and this just operates.
I have a question, if I may. I'm seeing people in the audience tonight I've never seen before. I'm just wondering how many of you attended this board meeting because of this one agenda item? Nicole, is that why you? Okay, it's not that, okay. No, there at least 3 or 4 people have asked questions. I thought maybe that it was a bigger concern.
No, they're here watching and this came up and
Okay.
just joined it.
It is a pretty big concern.
So I know how big of a concern it was throughout the district.
Wondering, I saw the survey for why employees left. I'm wondering if we can do a survey, because I hear a lot about how teachers don't have what they need in the classroom, but then I also look at all of the donations. So I'm wondering if we can send a survey out to every teacher saying what tools is it that you do not have in your classroom, so we can at least wrap our heads around what it is instead of the, you know what I'm saying, as it comes up.
That's a great idea.
So I would just like to say one thing about the Chromebooks. I talked a lot with tech, and what we're proposing, however they're procured, is that we move away from the Chromebooks to a Lenovo that we can connect to our system. So because the Chromebooks are very difficult for tech to work on, and they exist outside of our network. And so they're very low cost, they're the same price as a Chromebook, but they then have the security of our system. The kids are logged onto our system, and so that's the change that we're looking to make, whether they end up through crowdsourcing or whether the district purchases them. But that's very important to the tech team, because that's that level of protection.
That's one of the reasons why you want this in the silo, because the tech guys are, and they're absolutely correct, a good basic Windows laptop runs about the same price.
And we've actually been substituting the Lenovo's for Chromebooks for our regular orders since, I think, maybe February or March.
The last 8 that I got, or 7, were
Lenovo's.
they were whatever they
The whatever
told you
window
to
based,
get,
yeah. So
Windows based.
that's,
Right.
It was a little bit of a nightmare. The Chromebooks were way better.
I know, I get it. My kid had a Chromebook. I mean, that's, I understand the
But I
Chromebooks are
understand the
little, but
network
that's
part.
kind of been, and I was,
And I said, whatever you want me to get, that's fine. So,
Has that been changed on the, when you click the link, it suggests Chromebook? Okay.
no.
That's
Because
what we're revising this for.
Because I was just on the link and it hasn't been changed yet. Okay, so it's just,
It has not.
the link is still suggesting Chromebooks, is all I'm saying.
Mrs. Cohen, do you have any other comments?
I'm a little taken aback that I can't have a normal conversation without offending somebody. And I'm really sorry that it offended you. I'm really trying to have a dialogue. And, you know, I'm all up for vigorous debate, but when the conversation is instantly stunted with, you've offended me, and then I'm interrupted because I sit and I listen. I don't interrupt. I listen until somebody's finished, and then I say what I have to say, and I would appreciate that same respect back. You don't have to like me, you don't have to agree with what I say. But I expect as somebody who donates my time, who isn't on the payroll, who spends an inordinate amount of time working for this district, that you at a minimum show the students in this district that you respect your community who is working for you. That's all I'm going to say.
All right, item 6.4, and these are our policies on retirement, GCQE and GDQC. This is actually a change that was made in these policies by the board and adopted on April 28th of 2016, and we have been following them. Unfortunately, they were not uploaded to the policy bridge, And so because of the time lapse since the last approval, the ASBA had asked for the board to reaffirm these policies before they upload them to the policy bridge. And so we are asking that the board suspend the first and second reading process, since these were already approved and are identical to the ones approved previously, to be approved at this meeting.
So this has already taken effect.
Yes, and we've been following this policy since 2016. It's just when you go on the policy bridge with the ASBA and click, you see the old policy with the inaccurate amount.
Is there a way to make sure when I go on Policy Bridge, it doesn't have a title for everything? I know you send it in with the title. Is there any way to fix that? Do they give us access at all to update anything on our own?
I could sit down and do an audit of each policy, but obviously I have proof that this was sent in, but they're saying
Right.
they didn't see it. So
Right.
again, anytime it's a system, if it falls through the cracks, and I just don't have the time to go through every time to make sure it's been changed on the thing, but I mean, that is the only way we could do it, is to audit it.
Because when you go into the Policy Bridge, sometimes there's just the number. And you're
Oh,
like,
there's no title.
what is it? What is
Okay.
that? What are those 5 things there is what I need in there. So,
So for example, on this one, it says the GDQC, and then it doesn't say the retirement for support staff.
correct. And when you're looking through a lot of policy, that becomes frustrating. And we wouldn't stand for it if we were looking at Arizona revised statutes if it didn't have the title and we had to, go into each one, so. But I understand that you send it in. I've seen your forms, so. Do we have TAs or any student? I don't know if there is anything like that where, because that would be an interesting, fascinating thing for them to understand if there was, because I was a TA when I was in high school, so I don't know if we have TAs at the high school level, teacher assistants or, okay. I didn't know if that would, those kind of things could be something to interest our kids, whether it's through government or whatever. Just a thought. I know we can't keep adding to everybody's job description of projects.
But it would be helpful if, for anybody who sees something like that, to let us know, because we can at least request them as we find them. And I know ASB offers the opportunity to do an audit, but they also charge for that.
They shouldn't charge extra when you submit it in the first place. Maybe ASBA just needs to be able to allow us to access our own policy bridge and update. Maybe that's something that we could.
If you do find anything, just send to me and I will resubmit it. Although then they want to go back to the board.
I know. Okay.
Item 6.5 is the request for the board to approve the release of an RFP in order to get proposals for a video surveillance system. And so based on all of the work that we've been doing around school safety and the money that was set aside in our bond to do this work, we are looking to move forward now that we have the foundation there to get bids for a surveillance system. We actually want to bid for the entire district, and while we may not necessarily be able to implement for the entire district at all at one time.
So the RFP was pretty extensive, and I read through it, even though I didn't understand some of it. I read through it anyways. My question is, has there been any discussion? I've had a lot of complaints about the bathrooms. So has there been any discussions on putting them in the bathroom? Obviously not in the stalls, that's not what I'm talking about, but especially at the high school.
You can't do that.
So my understanding is that's a violation of the Fourth Amendment. With everything that we're going to do, we're going to send it over to legal, just about placement of cameras.
What you can do is place the camera
On the entries.
On the wall outside the bathroom, and we've done that for a long time.
See who's going in.
Yes.
Okay.
And then when there has been a problem there, you can either monitor it or you can go back and find an incident and you can find who showed up and track it down that way.
Is that because of vandalism?
Or bullying or anything.
What are you hearing in the bathroom?
Drugs.
Yeah.
You know, it used to be that when I was up there, that staff members, males used the boys' bathroom, so they were always going in there. It eliminated that problem. The females in certain areas, if they, between classes, they would go down there. And we were very restrictive on kids getting out of class and just heading to a public bathroom. We sent them to the nurse's office. You know, I mean, if they had a medical problem, that's where you want them to go to. But it's beyond me why it would work at one time and now it doesn't work, and then you have security up there. It's just the presence of an adult. I'm not saying they go in there and watch them. I'm saying that they simply walk in, a quick look. The guys never had a problem using the boys' bathroom. The ladies did, but they would definitely go in and check it out, and it ended that problem. I think you have 4 security guards up there. You know, it's part of the responsibility, I think, of everyone on staff. If you're just expecting the administrators to enforce discipline, you're losing. If everyone on staff helps out, it cuts down the ratio of students to staff, to administrators, and it helps out. And once that becomes part of the culture, but you can eliminate a lot of those problems.
I don't disagree. The problem is, though, is that in a modern society, it's become very litigious. When you have parents showing up at a high school and saying, well, my kid's not going to serve that. After they've been caught and they know that they've done it wrong, parents walk in that office and they say, my kid's not going to serve that. You can't force them to do that.
You know, I don't have a problem. You put a camera, you know, outside in the hall, and then if the, but if the adults never go in there, or you never get a report, and if these cameras are time dated, then you can isolate it. But if you all of a sudden you don't know when it happens, and you're relying on that camera, I question.
Yeah, you can't rely solely on a camera. I'll give you, because I do this for a living. I can tell you that we had somebody come in and shoplift probably about 5-6 months ago. And they came in and they opened the front cabinet up, which is a big heavy glass door. You could hear it open. You could hear it close. We weren't alerted to the fact that somebody was stealing from us because of a camera. We were alerted because you could hear the door open, you could hear the door close. Somebody opened it, somebody closed it. A staff member came out, walked around and intervened, and you know, and then the dance started because out the front door the person went down the walkway and back out of the walkway, across the parking lot. All sorts of fun stuff happened. We had cameras on the whole thing. But when the police officer showed up, he said, prove it. And I pulled out the footage and I said, here you go. He says, can I have a copy of that? I said, you absolutely can. He said, by the way, I know who that is. I know where they live. Problem solved. Because it showed clearly that the person had pocketed it. And, you know, here we are with an RFP for a good high-definition camera system. And that's really what it is. Cameras don't prevent anything. Cameras are evidence. You're exactly right.
But they can also be a deterrent, and that's why I was questioning.
And I don't have a problem with that. I mean, anything that'll help you provide a nice, wholesome place that cut down on vandalism, I'm all in favor of that.
Jamie, what were you?
I'm saying Pat's right.
Okay.
So, I was agreeing. I was agreeing. Sorry, I was agreeing with Pat.
So maybe they didn't have lawyers back when I was around the high school.
Not the way they do now.
So you can't put cameras in a bathroom?
No.
Because it's a violation of the Fourth Amendment?
Well, it's a violation of a lot more than the Fourth Amendment.
Well, I'm not saying in the stalls
There's
at
still
all.
things that carry on outside the stall, and people sometimes just, it's their
Gotcha.
privacy.
Okay.
Right.
So if it's outside facing in as the door opens and closes?
You're not
or
having
you're
the
not sure?
expectation of privacy at that point in
Okay.
time.
Yeah. And that's a really important place to have
Okay.
cameras.
Yes.
Okay, so that would be a place that we would be thinking about.
So now these are IP-based cameras. And did we, so they don't have the RP in front of them, we put a reasonable expectation of what we thought the resolution should be on these?
Yes. They wrote all of those things.
It was in there.
I
It
don't
was
have
very
this.
detailed.
Yeah.
I understand. I'm quizzing her.
I will have all those things. And John, I sat through a meeting and went, yeah.
Are they going to be white or gray?
It'll be flush mount and have
So-
protection.
So is the intention, because they're IP-based cameras, is the intention to allow law enforcement to have the ability to access?
Yes, that was in there.
Yes, and we have to make sure that we're protected. So within, to make sure that students are protected and purpose protected.
Correct.
Item 6.6 is a discussion and possible action should the board decide they would like to based on the discussion regarding our student dress policy.
I asked this to be put on last meeting because we had pretty decent Facebook pushback on the student dress. So it's a board discussion, so we'll open it up if the board wants to talk to you about it. If not, then we'll see if anybody in the audience knows.
And what you have for your backup is the elementary dress regulation and then the secondary dress regulation.
Is the Facebook discussion coming more from high school and middle school parents rather than elementary parents?
High school, and a lot of it is it's new. I think the enforcement numbers were first day there were 40 infractions at the high school, second day there were 5. Just normal stuff, but you hear the normal, well, I didn't know, I wasn't informed, I wasn't at the board meeting. So we want to be fair, we want to open it up if there's discussion, let's hear it. So anybody from the audience?
That's actually why I am here. And I totally support having a dress code, and I'm a teacher at the high school. And that first day, everyone was dress coding, and now I'm not seeing it as enforced. And I think it's because I'm struggling with the term professional that is in there. And I know we're not trying to single out the females, but if it's professional, we now have boys in board shorts. We have boys with bananas and rubber duckies all over their shorts. And if we're going for professionalism, that's not professionalism. And I don't see the problem with a little bit of fray at the ankle. There's no holes anywhere, a little fray. And cutouts down the leg, why we can't have the cutout, but we can have a meshed over cutout. What's the difference between a meshed hole and a frayed hole? And so I just, as a teacher, would like some clarification and some support, because you guys did kind of change the verbiage and put this rule in place for us. It's not that I wanted it, I wanted the holes lower than the fingertips, and I want to support you guys for putting this rule in place. But it's hard when the boys are walking around in board shorts and then our girls have to be professional in these non-frayed jeans.
Well, can I ask you a quick question?
Yes.
Because you use two different types of clothing. You point out the boys in the board shorts and the girls in the jeans.
Yes.
What if the girls were in the board shorts? Would that fit into the policy that we wrote?
If they're fingertip, yeah.
So why aren't the girls wearing board shorts?
Because they don't make board shorts for females, I guess. I don't know. Like, our girls can't walk around in their bathing suit bottoms, but the boys, and that's just, I think the word appropriate would be a little bit better instead of professional. If we're not trying to single out.
Well, it says here that the thing that we changed is bottom shall be fingertip length, appropriately hemmed, cover all undergarments, and be free from rips, frays, holes, and tears.
But wasn't the backing of that to be professional because they're at school?
Well,
and
professional, I think, is a thought process because everybody has a level of professional dress based on where they work and what they do. And I've had people disagree with me, and it's fine to disagree with me on things, but I view students as if they're in a profession, and there's got to be a certain level of attainment in dress to the profession. No different than a firefighter's not going to go in a suit and tie.
100%.
and so on. But the other part of this is as we start to address things like what we're doing with Rachel's Challenge and bullying and better kindness and so on, we start to wander into self-esteem. And we start to wander into, you know, are you dressing for how people are going to treat you? And my concern is, and continues to be, when I see how, and it's not boys or girls, it's how students dress, and it fluctuates based on trend and fashion statement and wildly all over the map. My concern is this, is that we are eroding the self-esteem of our youth through what they wear to school and what they're allowed to wear to school, and that dress code is a big part of that. As that self-esteem goes down, you become much more easy to bully, harass, and so on. And you can put whatever modifier in front of harass you want, but you know, I don't want those problems in our schools. And I think that's the real overarching thought process, that it is a profession, there should be a professional level of dress, and in the process of that, we can eliminate a lot of these underlying ills that come out of, you know, the short shorts, or the one I saw that just, I scratched my head and laughed. This very lovely young lady was walking across the school campus and had her jeans sliced all the way from the ankle up to the top of the thigh and then left to right across because she couldn't wear short shorts. And I'm going, okay. But as I look at that, you know, we should have a standard of dress. I guess where the consternation comes in is when you start talking about the patterns on the side. Those patterns come in different lengths. They come, you know, in a nice, you know, calf area. Here's a little bit of an embellishment here. And they work their way from there to all the way up the side. And so the question is, what's a hole, where does it exist? And now we have to start defining what a hole is and where it's allowed. And do we really need to be doing that, or can we just have a reasonable expectation that this is the standard, just like going into a workplace? Here's the standard, here's what we're expecting, here's some side benefits out of it, and we'd like you to make a good first impression and so on.
And I understand that and I see that, but being a staff member at the high school where not every teacher is on board, I literally could give out 50 dress codes every day if I did not say, roll those pants up so I can't see the front, pull those shorts down.
Well, and from your statement right there, I would say that's insubordination.
But we're being told by admin because they're not being supported, and I see on Facebook that we didn't create this, we approved the rule, but we're not the one enforcing it, so ask admin how they want enforced.
We don't. It's up to admin to enforce it, and it's up to staff to enforce it based on admin's direction.
But depending on what school you're at, that rule is tweaked. Some allow it, some don't allow it. It's not across the board. So what I'm asking for is clarity. If we're going to allow any cutouts, can they be between below fingertip? And I'm referring to leggings.
The clarity comes in the policy.
But the leggings with the mesh are not considered a hole, and those are okay. The leggings with a cutout with no mesh is not okay because that's a hole.
That's actually a little different because Mr. Becker and I spoke, and the lace was not allowed.
The mesh is 100%, I have been told, I have it in meeting notes to bring back to other teachers.
I think lace and mesh are two different. The lace is like the shoelace going up.
Is it really?
Right. I mean, you see the leg, if that's the goal.
Well, here's something that to think about is, think of all the words, holes, holes in mesh, holes in lace. What's the definition of lace? Lace has holes. There are larger holes. There are all kinds of holes and all kinds of fabrics and things. What you don't want, you want something clear and simple, because you don't want teachers or administrators having to look at a child's clothing. Now, if they have to look at it below the knee, that's okay, but anywhere above the knee makes the teacher and administrator extremely uncomfortable. And that's where the line has to be drawn. But to glance below, let's say fingertip, I won't even say knee, glance below fingertip, I'm willing to, if we can't define what a hole is. I mean, you made a very good case.
And I'm losing a lot of instruction time.
And that too.
How much instruction time are you losing? Because I hear this argument, and to me, I mean, to me, it's yes, no.
So I stand outside my door every day, except for if I have to go to the other hallway to use
Right.
the restroom. And if I have a kid, I send them to the office, then they come back 20 minutes late to class. Then it's a huge uproar because now they're mad that they had to change into shorts that show more of their leg than the leggings did before. And just trying to, when you have 32 kids that are not okay with the dress code, it takes 5 to 7 minutes sometimes to get them back to where we need to be. And that student now just lost 20 minutes of my class time.
And how many times a day does that happen?
If I followed the rule and sent kids every day, I would have 2 to 3 per class period.
You know,
No one fixes that.
Since this used to be the rule in high school, that either it was unenforced or it was, so it's resurrected itself. I heard this thing of, well, you know, I was out at Dillard's with my wife, and I happened to look at these ripped, ragged jeans. You know, they're selling them for $89. The cheapest I could find was over at Penny's, and it was $49. Only in America would this happen. In other words, it used to be that when you would go places, you didn't want to look poor. Now it's fashionable. But all this comes out of Hollywood. It comes from all these people are in these unrealistic situations. I guess what I'm saying is, and also since this came up, I knew it was going to come up, as I went around town in banks, in other places, I don't see it. I don't see it at all. And I didn't want to begin asking these people, hey, do your employees come here? I guess what I'm saying is schools should be doing the best to prepare kids for the world after. And one of the things is, how often do you go in and you're going to do an interview and it's the last time? You don't get the job, they don't tell you or whatever. But we ought to be preparing kids, and we set standards. I mean, you know, I've been down at McDonald's. I don't see the ripped, torn, ragged jeans. In a lot of places have uniforms. So kids can do this. It's just like, you know, I look at standards in school. 60% graduation standard. Who established that? Where did that come from? Get here on time. We're going to start school at 8 o'clock in the morning. Well, what's the reason for that? Ask employers here in town why they let people go. They show up, they don't show up, or they show up late consistently. Goodbye. You know, I don't think this is mind-boggling to have expectations for kids. And I think, just like you said the first day, Jamie, what, 40?
40.
I think that's going to happen. But once it's enforced, what will happen? It's no different than kids getting to your class on time. If all the staff isn't expecting that, be prepared for the fact that you're going to get kids late to your class. But if that's the expectation, if the expectation is that kids need to be in school to pass, but some teachers, they never show up and they pass the class, that makes it tough for you, but it's unrealistic.
And I completely agree, and I love that there's no policy. I just want more clarification across the board and get rid of those gray areas if possible.
And I'm with you. I hope you don't think I'm preaching to the choir. But I mean, I'm with you because I went through this for years. You establish, you know, the teacher establishes it, and the whole school does it, and you'll get on board. And I guess kids, you know, being kids, they're going to go through this. So I think we're always going to be doing it.
Anytime we have change of any kind, something that we often forget to do is after we put the change in place is to go back and review it and see how it's working. So I'm glad that John has placed this on the agenda because this gives us a chance to have a conversation and be realistic. But we need to honestly know if it's parts of it are not working and that, how it could be cleared up. I myself would ask the administrators at the high school to, now that they've done it with your input, that they've tried it out. Now, what do they want? I don't want them to be afraid of the school board. I think that taking a look and then tweaking it is a normal process anytime you have change. And so this is a good opportunity to do that. But I don't know if the administration at the high school is planning on making a little presentation or anything next week's board meeting.
What was the dress code for pants or bottoms when you were principal at the high school, Kathy?
We didn't have holes. There were no holes. But it was not the trend. It was not the style.
Okay, but how would you have dealt with that crosshatch, what they're calling lace?
Well, first of all, since it wasn't a problem, we were trying to cover up the 3 Bs. I will leave that to your imagination what those were. And we managed to do that with the shirt. The new trend, and guess what? In 3 years, it could be see-through clothing is the next trend. I mean, it's not going to get any better. So this is the trend now to deal with. And it's a hard one because holes come in all sizes and kinds and fabrics and so forth. And it's a difficult one.
I think the fact that this will be the 3rd time in a year that we're bringing the dress code back, or just over a year. I wonder if it isn't time to consider uniforms, kindergarten through 12th grade. And I say that because this is a constant battle, and like technology almost, you can't keep up with the pace of the trend. And it's, of course, in high schoolers, especially, middle school, high school, even now in elementary school, to push back. But if there's nothing to push back about, maybe they'll take their scholarship a little more seriously if they're dressed in that way. And of course things are trendy, but it's not a right to show your trendiness while you're trying to be serious and learn and achieve and those types of things. So I understand that the school would be responsible for paying for those who couldn't pay, but I hear it all the time. I have parents all the time, mostly younger, actually 0 in high school, but that want it because they're so tired of trying to keep up with the trends or arguing with their kids or whatever. And at least Monday through Friday, that would not be an issue. And it would never be an issue again in our schools. And it's very much what McDonald's requires, what, the hospital requires. It's a uniform for the job you're...
strip the complete individuality from our students, because a lot of kids, they have self-esteem issues, and now we're like putting them in this thing they already feel uncomfortable with.
Well, I understand that, but there are so many options. We discussed it. We had a presentation. I'm not sure what the situation is with where we currently get our standardized shirts. But when I go on that website, I can't even think of the name of it, the little French toast, they have a plethora of options. They have an option for every size, every height, every, everything. I mean, we could give options. You can buy, the shirts, the shorts, the pants, the skirt, the skort, the romper, the blazer, you could purchase any of the approved uniform structure and still be able to show your individuality. I don't know.
Until they start ripping the pants up for the uniform.
Well, no, because that would be...
Is the sole reason for the dress code just to have freebies covered? Is that...
I was there a long time, starting in '71. The idea was to create an atmosphere where kids, you sort of guided them in an appropriate dress is a thing that is expected all the way through society. Whether you're going to church, whether you're going to work, whether you're going wherever, appropriate dress. And it was put in over a period of time, and it was effective. And we went through, this is not new, this phenomenon of rags. I think it came out in the 80s. And we addressed it, and the kids did not wear rags to school. And so, you know, people say, well, there's an easy, you know, you put in a policy, it's consistently enforced, the kids see it, and eventually they begin to do what is expected. Now, to all of a sudden say, well, hey, we're going to put them in uniforms. I'll tell you, as a board member, I'm not in favor of that. But one thing you could do is you could, and we used to do it at the high school, we followed every discipline incident, and it was presented to the board every quarter. And you know what used to happen? Kids coming in, where were most of the discipline incidents? Where would you expect? Freshmen. There was a precipitous decline by the time they were seniors. What were the different incidents? The different incidents were like, dress code. And you know what? The same thing happened. So what I'm saying is, wait, let's see how well this policy works out. Let's see if that they go down. That will tell you, is it being effective? Now, like you say, if they have pants that have is it like a lace or a?
It's like a crosshatch.
You know what? If it was,
I had them on the
it's down near the ankles. I think I've seen them. I'm telling you, as the principal, that would not be in my office. Use a little bit of common sense.
You don't like lace?
No, I'm saying that, you know, that would not come to my office as a whole.
Oh,
I'm talking
I see.
as ripped, ragged, torn, and tears. That's what we're talking about.
But there's jeans now that are manufactured with a frayed hem that those kids are getting detention. It's a hem, it's manufactured, it's not tattered, it's...
Well, those ones with the big old holes in them are all manufactured too.
And that's why I'm saying
Right.
we need to clarify.
Well, and it is clear, it is very clear, but I understand what you're saying,
Because
and times have changed.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
they totally have changed from the time you were a principal, and enforcing things, I'm sorry, they have. And I really see that this will continually be an issue. And you will always be trying to do your best as a teacher to enforce it, and then there's another teacher who's like, it's so lame. And then there's a mixed message, and then the kids push.
the
And
policy is no back.
exactly.
And so that's
all the while, the policy was clear, it's just there's always going to be a way to push around it.
The problem is this. Back in I think
Common
it was
sense is
1983, when Mr. Rooney was the
I
assistant
thought you were going to
principal.
say 1783.
I was getting close to it. But we had a thing where you know, they brought in a new rule. It was new and appropriate displays of public affection. And the problem was and I was probably an offender at one level or another. But you know, boys were making out with girls in the hallway. And so the new rule came in, and all of a sudden there was all of this enforcement on it. I mean, teachers who you thought were your friend were now coming at you and saying, you're doing this and you're wrong, and here's your warning. You do it again, and you're off to go see Mr. Rooney. Okay. Did we like it? No. If we fought it, would we get in trouble? Yes. Did we stop doing it? Absolutely. Were there still people who tried to skirt that? Yes. I see this to be no different.
Can we talk a moment about the frayed hems? So I know that you can now buy clothing with frayed hems and you're in style, but the people that I'm concerned about are the parents who buy clothing a little too long, knowing that they're ninth grader, whoever's going to hopefully grow into it. And it won't take many months for the bottom to fray. And I just think realistically, I mean, I would vote to, okay, don't worry about the frayed hems. I'm not going to track down, well, bring me the receipt. Did you buy these frayed, or did they fray on their own? I'm just not going to go there. And I just think that maybe we're going too far with the frayed hems.
Is this a problem? Are people being called in for frayed hems
If-
because they're
if I
too long
followed
in the
policy,
in the back?
Yes. All the way around.
So you're pulling kids in because their pants are too long and they fray in the back?
It's because of the Facebook discussion, because, and that's where we've been asking, where is our line? I've had to take in an elementary school student who had full-on black pants, but at the bottom, there was a design of a hole. And it was hemmed, and it was a hole. And we were like, yes or no? And so that's where I think Megan's saying, like, we asked them to roll them up, so we can't see the hole. They can still wear the pants, but they can't see the hole. So that's where we're asking you guys for that clarification. Just like the picture on Facebook of the fingertip length.
She was my student.
And
That's the one with that crosshatch?
That's,
How many days did she wear those pants?
she wore them the next day, and I sent her to the office when she walked in my room with them. And I talked to her about it, and she now knows. But it's
But that's a protest. That's a student saying, I'm not going to follow the rules.
the second day, yes. But there's a lot of students that wear them that they're not aware that that's not okay. And depending on what teacher you are, what school site, it may be, you may not know it's okay.
And wait, do we not have orientation? Do we not say what it is? And I'm not saying this about you, but like with all the Facebook, with 3 times to the board, how do kids not know that it's not okay? Because they emphasize no holes, whether they're manufactured or...
I'll give you an example, then we'll get to a couple of people out there. I went to orientation at my children's elementary school. The teacher went through everything, and a parent raised their hand in the back and said, my daughter's got long arms. This was this year. Well, we try and work with that. And I'm standing there, I'm like, well, wait a minute, that's not what the rule is. And then she looks up and sees me and says, oh, by the way, it's not in our slide presentation, but we have to have no rips, holes. And she went into it, but only after recognizing I was standing there watching the presentation. So I do understand at some level this is an insubordination of staff at some level. So, Carol. Mrs.
I'll
Nowakowski.
let her first and then.
Okay, well, we'll take that
Kimberly
first.
Pyden. I'm a student, I'm a senior at the high school, and you were talking about self-esteem and how the dress code would supposedly help self-esteem. But when a student's style is stripped from them like that, like with the dress code, I know it's different times, but now the ripped jeans are trendy. And that's people's style now. But when you say you can't wear that, all throughout kindergarten through high school, isn't that kind of stripping their self-esteem? By drilling into kids' heads that they cannot express their individuality, no matter if it's professional or not. Isn't that kind of hypocritical?
Does then when you go into the work, do you work?
Yes.
Where
Well,
do you
I'm
work?
getting a job now.
Where have you worked?
I've worked with Parks and Rec,
Okay, does Parks and Rec have a standard of dress that you
Yes.
have to wear?
but that is a job. This
No,
is
no,
school.
no.
They're
But
two different things.
let me finish the thought here, because you have a standard of dress when you're paid, and that's okay, because you're being compensated.
Yeah.
Okay. So when you go to school and you're receiving an education that the community pays for on your behalf, there's something wrong with the standard of dress? I want to
I
understand
just
this.
think that it is kind of disrespectful to the students by saying that they cannot express themselves. Like, I understand the fingertip length rule.
Okay, but
It's just ripped jeans, I don't get it.
But
Like,
when your employer says it, it's not disrespectful, but when the school district that's providing the education from the community does, it is disrespectful?
Yes, because when you get called out in front of a classroom
with all your teammates, peers, then, and you have to go to the office in front of everybody, it's kind of humiliating. Like
So-
having a change of clothes, wearing bright purple pants that everyone knows you got dress coded. I
So-
think that's kind of disrespectful.
So when your employer does the same thing and gives you a written warning because the same thing happened, that's
With
disrespectful?
employers, they usually send you home
Yeah.
and have you change by yourself. But at school, at least in my experience, they give you clothes that are kind of humiliating.
You don't have an option to call home and get another pair of...
I wasn't given the option.
Okay.
But everybody has the option to adhere to the dress code. even
I
if you-
was told to get a lone shirt and then go change and then show them. I wasn't told I could call,
A loan shirt.
like,
A loaner.
go borrow a shirt.
From the bookstore.
Yeah.
I don't think she heard what you said, though, about the option to adhere to.
Oh, I said, but before the humiliation takes place, you have the option to adhere to the rule and not put yourself in the position to be dress coded and pulled out of the classroom and embarrassed and put in the shorts.
I know, I'm just saying
Okay.
the dress code itself is just kind of disrespectful in my opinion, but.
Well, I'm trying to understand, I really am trying to understand from a student's perspective how it's disrespectful.
Because, well,
I
I'm
understand
not
it's
trying
your
to get into-
style, and I understand the kids want to express themselves. They
Yeah.
have a lot to say. And I understand that there's a lot of trends going on, and everybody wants to show, their trend. But there's a lot of time besides Monday through Friday from 8 to 3 where you can do just that. So why is it disrespectful for the community to have an expectation of how you would dress in school from 8 to 3?
Because of a long time ago when we first got school standardized shirts, and then I heard it was all throughout, not just high school. It was elementary, kindergarten. I just think drilling into a young kid's head that young, that you have to dress a certain way in order to be, be appropriate. I think calling out a young kid for not dressing appropriately is kind of weird. Like, this kind of creeps me.
So when we go to the Nova graduation 2 years ago, and we're at the Nova graduation, and you've got fifth graders that are dressed inappropriately, is that too young to be calling it out?
But yes, because I feel like it's adults telling a young kid how to dress. The fact that you're even looking at them like that is kind of weird.
Here's the thing: is
It's like sexualizing young children.
they're up on the stage, walking across the stage. They have body parts hanging out. It's not me overtly looking at them. It's literally on display for anybody in the audience to see.
I feel like that's the parents' responsibility, not.
I think we all agree here. I think we all agree here, and I will tell you that my daughter, who could not stand the fact that I was all over her as a youngster all the way through high school, and we're talking, as she would walk out the door, I'd be like, raise your hands, and she'd be like, I'm like all the way, and she's like, no, go change your shirt, and she's like, oh, you're the worst mother ever, is 27 now, and I'll tell you, she thought I was a nut job then, but she thanks me now. She's been in a lot of situations in her short adult life, in her professional life, where she says, God, I couldn't stand the way you rode me. I mean, I literally would pull things out of her closet. I wanted to teach her there's appropriate times to dress certain ways. I'm not trying to stunt your expression, but there's a time and a place. But now at 27, she's never felt underdressed, overdressed, or inappropriately dressed at any adult thing she's ever done. And she says, I'm appreciative of that now. I never thought I'd be thanking you. And, as a parent, you don't hear that very often. So I'm appreciative of that.
Now I feel I have to defend myself.
Uh-oh.
And I usually don't like to talk in front of people, but Bonnie Python. I'm a rule follower too, and I always made sure Kimberly went to school. She's never had any problems with dress code. She got one time this year. She might have wanted to test it out, because she's seen all through middle school, everybody did follow the code.
Right.
I made her, and she was like, why isn't anybody else following the code?
So all through middle school, high school, this was her expression. And then I hear it, you know, different standards she sees. The girls see it. They see the boys running through the hallways during the prep, you know, where they go, pep assemblies.
Yeah.
With the short shorts, short tops, and everyone's cheering them on, but the girls aren't allowed to do that. They're not being cheered on, they're saying dress it down.
I think it was a couple years ago.
The girls, they
Absolutely.
notice this, they're old enough, they're smart enough, and they feel offended.
Sure.
And this is what results from it. You gotta try to meet the kids in the middle, so they feel part of the process, because what's happening is it's this side or this side, there's no middle. And that's what I'm seeing as a parent, and
Well, but actually this is middle. I mean, this is what people don't understand.
Right.
On
But
one
that's
end
just
is, on
my
one end is wear what you want. And on the other end is, let's go to a full enforced uniform. And so when we start talking, we're just talking about bottoms, because I know we have the standardized shirts. But we all say we want to preserve the right for the kids to express themselves, and we want to make sure that you know, we're not forcing them into certain things. Well, here it is. Here's middle ground. Middle ground is, you can't wear what you want, but we're not going to go to a full uniform.
but they don't feel part of the process, I don't think. I think they feel,
How do we make them part of the process then? I think that's the interesting question, because we're a policy-making body. We have advertised this on numerous occasions that we're going to be talking about the dress code.
right.
We've invited people, we've put it on Facebook, we've solicited opinions. We've engaged in trying to unpack at least part of our logic in public forums.
Right.
And now I hear that they're not a part of the process, and if we would just simply consult the children, because they're still children at this point.
I thought that we made a mistake, that we needed at least bare minimum parent input in this, and I think that's a step that we overlooked. And this takes time to get that, take a look. The other thing I would like to ask Kimberly, I appreciate your being here, you're the only high school student here tonight. As far as the holes go, what would, from your perspective, be a reasonable, livable rule about the holes that you think that we could live with and that would keep teachers from spending so much of their time having to, and take away from class time to enforce this rule? You have a suggestion?
I feel like if the holes aren't in like debatable areas, like way up high, like on the waist or something like that.
Below fingertip, would that work?
No, below, I think like on the thighs and down, to me. But I think from higher up, like by your crotch is
well, then
okay.
Then I have to look there to ascertain that, and I don't want to look there. I don't mind looking below your knees or below your fingertips, but I just don't want to put staff in that position. I don't think it's right to you and the students, and I don't think it's right to me to have to look there. So that's a big issue. To me, it's a privacy issue. It's uncomfortable. You don't know how many teachers and administrators are very uncomfortable having to examine students. And they shouldn't have to go through that.
Especially with like elementary school students. I just feel like that whole
Let's just talk about high school though, just a minute. I'd like your input there about high school and holes.
Well, I like what, like where they should be.
Yeah. We could all live with.
A little above the knee.
Well, that's subjective. What's a little? An inch, 2 inch?
Sure, yeah.
Now you're measuring.
But I don't
Yeah, we don't
agree
want to
with the
measure,
fingertip
no
thing
measure.
because everyone's arms are different lengths, so that's subjective too.
Well,
No,
and
it's not. It's not subjective.
Well, some girls' arms or some boys' arms could be way up here, but another one's is halfway down the leg.
Well, that would work. That would be a rule that would, for each student, would be applied.
But that's not
I
fair.
see her point, because if I wore fingertip shorts, my butt cheeks would be hanging out. And there are some students that
And then
they're
mine
active,
would be
but they are
halfway down the leg.
showing more than they should show.
Oh, I see what you mean.
And so if someone has really short arms like me,
But what about below the knees?
What my
Below.
high school did was dollar bill. If you took a dollar bill and it touched the kneecap and the,
I don't
I know you don't want
I don't
to
want a
measure.
staff member touching a student to measure
With dollar
any
bill.
of
But
the
you're looking at
relations.
the. They held, I held the dollar, the staff didn't touch me.
You know, I'm just amazed that we decided this and it's back here. To me, this issue of dress is common sense, and the school can, just like an employer or anyone else, can say these are the standards. We just put it in, school's been in session for what, 3 weeks. The first day, okay, people didn't get the message. The second day it went down. And what I'm saying is, it worked. I don't know why it worked when I was there and it can't work today. And we, why?
I can tell you why, because it is.
It was me? Okay. But see, I don't think this, in other words, you put in a policy and let's see how it works out. I went through the same thing. I've been there. It isn't a rocket science. And here we've spent a large amount of time debating the dress code, which 3 meetings ago, 3 school board sessions ago, we went ahead and put this in. You know, I just...
Well, we clarified it.
Okay,
we put it in over a year ago, and then there was pushback, and how do we get around it, and how do we push the limit?
And it was in for years.
Right.
And it was enforced, and Carol can tell you. And it solved the problem. And I want an atmosphere at that school where it's a wholesome atmosphere, where we're just not trying to train kids academically, their minds, but we're trying to do a lot of other things. And by that, reinforce, you know, I know it's not popular to say, but schools should be reinforcing strong family, traditional, accepted values, so that when kids walk out, they have those. We should be training them mentally. We should be training them on other things, manners, decorum, and all this. Because, you know, in my lifetime, I've seen so many people that haven't had that good training, and you know what? It's negatively affected them. They have not gotten jobs, they've not made advancements, and stuff like that. And you know, I just, it boggles my mind that we're dealing with this today.
Superintendent Desire, if I might inquire, you looked through the old handbooks for the high school?
Yes.
How long has this, what was this out of effect before we started to readdress it?
I believe it was 2 years.
So we're 2 years removed from the dress code being changed in the handbook. Maybe
The
not
holes?
enforced.
The whole part is new. The whole part's completely, I've been here since 2011 and that's.
It was in there.
It was in there, perhaps not enforced, but it was a part of policy.
I'm a believer in every rule in the handbook should be rules that we enforce. And so
100%.
I'll openly say I'm the one who took it out because it wasn't something that we enforced. And and it wasn't really an issue at the time. There wasn't huge holes.
Because closed didn't have, that
But
wasn't.
I don't
that's
believe,
why.
I don't believe that we should have rules that we don't enforce. And so when we did the revision that year, we took it out. So that's why it went out.
Was it K-12? Was it in the handbook?
That would have been just high
It was just the
school.
high school one. That's why it was out of the high school.
It was in the junior high also.
I was as someone that's read the handbooks to my students for 25 years, I honestly don't recall.
I don't believe it was in the elementary.
Okay.
And the request was when we started to talk about this, that this be pushed all the way down into the elementary because there were issues there.
And we talked about like last year for the middle, or for the elementary, it did say no holes below the knee. So that was in last year's, and that was not an issue at Oro Grande, I know for sure, because, which was, I didn't reverse that one for sure, below last year.
I think common sense says that it shouldn't be an issue at all, and I think the fact that it is an issue is just highlighting the fact that we have this culture of protest, and I have a right to express myself, and I agree, you do, but there's also as Pat says, this is the time that you're training to know when it's a good idea to express yourself and when not to. And using your dress to do that in school is probably not going to serve you best in your future. Doing it on the weekends is a great idea.
Our students need to know the time and the place, and it's really hard teaching them something they're not being taught at home.
I understand.
So we're really, when we're making it strict and more strict and more strict, we're just battling a battle we should not be. I don't think, and I came from Texas, the dress code was different, but just 2 weeks ago I was in Phoenix, and one of the big schools in Phoenix, they just completely loosened up their dress code. There is no dress code now, and they are seeing less behavioral issues because these kids can be themselves. They're happy to be there, they're comfortable there. And I understand we want them to be professional, but we're talking about high school kids that their parents need to be supporting us, and if they're not, are we really doing any, like, we're killing ourselves over this dress code.
What school is it?
Benny Fairfax. I was there for a student council spirit convention, and they have the same size school. It's an open campus just like us. The kids can wear whatever hoodies they want, jeans they want. They just have to, they have a fingertip rule. Holes can be below the fingertips. They can't have spaghetti straps. And it was completely comfortable. The kids had heads. It felt really good to be there and see the kids enjoy being there. And it was just nice to see them be able to express themselves. And I talked to one of the security guards at length about it because I had some downtime when the kids were in their small groups. Granted, they have 10 security guards, we have 4, but they have noticed a huge change in student acceptance and behavior, being able to wear what they want to wear. And I don't want us to completely rip, but I know we need to have some rules, but we need to realize they're kids, and is this really supporting their education? My grades haven't gotten any better because they can't wear holes in their pants.
Yeah, and I know my boys hear it. I have 2 young men at the high school, and they hear it from the girls. And number 2 son, I think, more than others. And he's the one I had to back off the other day. He wanted to wear, it was whiteout day, and he had on white pants, a white shirt, and a white tie.
I wore white pants and a white shirt.
Go get a white t-shirt,
Yeah.
please. So.
I just want us to think like.
So what would you like to see if you could have us do whatever you wanted?
I love the standardized shirts. I wish we had a couple more fun, but they have club shirts, so that's not a big issue. But I really think if we just went fingertip all the way across, allowing phrase, they're in high school. They know, the kids that are going out to get jobs know how to dress when they go out to get jobs.
How is that if they're not being taught at home?
Because we enforce it at the school. They know when they go out for job interviews, through nighttime, through our leadership programs, things like that. Our students know how to dress when they need to. It's just like the adults in the community. I have ripped jeans, I wear them on the weekends. I see realtors, I see business people out running their businesses, and it's the time we're at. It's a professional look. It's just not what we're used to being as professional. And I really think we need to think about that. We're not back 10 years ago. Expectations of professionalism are not what they used to be, and trends are different. Men wear business suits without socks anymore. Like, that's a huge, to me, that's weird. Like, they want their ankles to show, they're short. Like, it's the style, it's what is changing with time, and we need to just keep those things. Is it really benefiting our education? Is it making our students learn any more by putting these tight, stringent rules on them?
Well, I don't think they're tight, stringent. I really don't. I did look, and I'll bring Tuesday, dress codes from across the country, and we are not tight and stringent here outside of the standardized shirt. I mean, that's a requirement, but I mean, there are so many districts that are.
Have a suit from where we're
I understand, but we also, I mean, for the past, I don't know, 2 months, has it, that we've received cards at every board meeting for all of us to read. Thank you for the dress code. Thank you. I haven't seen any, I know there's a bunch of chatter on Facebook, but that's not a real form of communicating to a government body on Facebook. We haven't gotten one complaint about, in writing, unless you have,
Yes.
okay, about the dress code being too strict.
And I did tell all 150 students, this meeting was today, and if you don't go and voice your concern and your passion, you have no right to complain from this point on.
So we have one
I
that has a
told
right.
every single one of my students, 150 of them today.
And how many kids are in the high school?
There's about 1,800.
How many?
1,800.
The compliance.
Okay.
And I have 150.
I think this, I think that
I just don't want it to
it's a
get
mood
worse.
issue.
And I just wanted to finish by saying we have almost 1,500 students in this city that don't attend our schools. And some of that reason is because of what is going on in our schools. And so they opt for other options. And some of the thank yous for changing the policy are coming from people who want to have their kids in our schools, but they don't want to deal with some of the things like the dress code. It's very uncomfortable. And as far as going back to elementary school, I just want to tag on. We were at an event, and I believe Mrs. Sire was there, and our mayor, and it was a student from Starline bending over in front of our mayor. And it was very uncomfortable. And this was before our dress code was instituted. And yes, it's the parent's responsibility to make sure that the child dresses properly, but if they're not, we have to have some rules, and they have to start young because the trends are getting younger and younger and younger. So I don't want to stunt anybody's creativity, but I mean, it shouldn't be the big deal that it is.
Should there be enforcing that at Nova graduation? When the kids
Absolutely.
dress that way? What would that look? Somebody would go up and pull the kid off the stage?
That's during the school day, so if they're getting on the bus to be transported, they should be dressed appropriately.
Right.
Yes.
They
And
would
we
not
did
be-
not have an issue this
They would not
last
be
year.
allowed to go.
No, I didn't see an issue, did you?
This
Not
last
this
year
year.
was not an issue. The year prior when we.
The past
before
few
we-
have been.
Yes.
The past few have been. And multiple comments from it. And again, I only highlight that because it's elementary, and it just gets more and more as you get older and older. So I'm not sure what the answer is. I myself struggled in school and wished for uniforms because then I wouldn't have to struggle. I wouldn't have to try to fit. I wouldn't have to try to be cool. I wouldn't have to try to, do all these things, the pressures that are on kids that don't have the money to buy $100 or $89 ripped jeans.
Well, I guess what I would like to say is, we brought this back and put it on the agenda, but if we're not, why did we do that if we're not ready to make some kind of modification? I don't understand.
Because we had an outpouring of parents on social media that wanted us to make sure that their considerations were heard.
Well, I
And
think
so,
it's...
and so that's where we're at. I mean, our other option, Kathy, is call to the public. And if you do a call to the public, it's a one-sided conversation where they come in, they fill out the form, they come here and they
No, I
yell at us
understand.
and how horrible we are.
I understand that.
I'd much rather have a discussion.
And this is the work session, and
Right.
so there's
Yeah.
no decisions to be made.
Right.
That once at the regular session, the item is worded such that if the board wanted to make a recommendation and take action, you could.
Can I?
No.
At the regular
I
session
don't mean
next week.
take action, but I mean, if I wanted to make a suggestion for next week's board meeting, can I make it tonight? Or would I have to make it?
You would have the ability to make a motion at the meeting and see if we can get a second and actually put it on the floor.
Okay.
And say you also have a lot of staff that need some clarification, because this vote was in June.
I thought it was in May.
It was in May.
And it went out before the end of school year.
We approved handbooks in May.
Okay. I thought the final decision was in June.
June, we codified it into policy, but the handbook adoption was in May,
And
and so this was coming since May.
And it was also my understanding that this wasn't brought to you as a board to make the decision. What was brought to you was different, and then it was
What was-
changed.
We were brought the handbook to approve the handbook.
Right.
And at the board meeting itself, without it being on the agenda, then there was a discussion of the dress code.
Because
The
when
dress code was not on the agenda that night.
The handbook as a whole, though, was open for discussion, the dress code being part of it.
Well, but what I'm saying is, since it's such a big issue, then to me, it should have been advertised in some way that parents and students, whoever could come and address it and say, give their opinion. We didn't do that, and I think that that's one of the reasons that people feel like they didn't have input.
Sorry to cut you off, Mrs. Cox.
That's
but-
okay.
But I believe that the administration asked for some level of change in the dress code.
The recommendation in the high school handbook was no holes below fingertip length, or above fingertip length.
Right, and that's my understanding of what that vote was supposed to be on.
Yes.
And it was changed that evening, and it wasn't brought to you by staff, and so that's where the break has been.
Well,
is because we were not.
can I ask you a question? Is your problem with the fact that it was changed, was not part of the process you wanted? Or is
In other
the
words, was
fact,
there a procedural violation?
No, the concern was the communication of what's appropriate, what's not appropriate. So Megan's not having to deal and decide and is rolling up what here okay and not okay. And we have 8 campuses that have different, is mesh okay versus, because that was a discussion.
Okay,
I keep
but-
saying
and I
this
were
is what the
All right.
staff wanted.
all right, but again, we get back to,
Right.
we looked at the handbook, we made a change to the handbook in May. In June, we aligned policy to match that, because we weren't brought a problem, we were brought a handbook. And so for what we could act on the handbook based on hearing that there was a problem in the highlighted change. So we acted on that. And so when you hear me, and I'm the guilty party on Facebook for saying it's up to administration and staff to enforce, this literally is something that rolls from superintendent down into a school as far as the clarification and the rollout and the enforcement of the policy and the handbook. Once the board sets a policy for the district, that interpretation part that you're looking for comes from the administration on down. That's not something that the board is going to sit here and say, this is what this is going to look like.
But the thing is it's not what the staff wanted. We wanted fingertip holes below the fingertip. I believe as a board, you chose to say no holes.
Well,
And
I
that-
never
does
got
the-
anything from whoever we are. I never
We,
got
as
anything.
I've heard from administrators, they recommended, and that's what Mrs. Sire just said, they would like holes below the fingertip.
But what I'm saying is, all this clarification that seems to be necessary at this point, from May when we did that until today, I've received not one email on it.
Okay, but you're the one who provided the clarification to begin with, right? This wasn't the extra rules, in other words, the frame and the holes below.
They are the ones that,
Those weren't part of the recommendation.
No, this is in
You added
policy.
the clarifications as
This
a
is-
board,
this
is
is
that
Roman.
right?
The policy is very clear.
Yes, but you added them as a board, is that
you
right?
guys changed the recommendation
We-
to say no holes, no fraying.
What we did is we said, why do you stop at the fingertips with the holes and the frays and the rips and the tears? The policy came to us as not below, you couldn't have any rips, holes, frays, or tears above the fingertips. And so yes, we made a change because the handbooks are ours to approve and the policy matter in that is ours as well. And so that was a change at the board level. The board made a decision. But based on that decision then comes the rollout. And you're asking us for a bunch of fine detail on what a hole is or what a rip is or what a fray is or how it's supposed to be enforced. You're asking Congress how the law should be enforced.
But you created the rule for us, so how should we enforce it?
So how should, but
That's what I'm asking. There's a bunch
we're
of
the
different types
we're the
of
legislative branch. We're the legislative branch of the
But
district.
you changed the terminology to a recommendation that staff was okay with, and now you're just saying, I'm not the one enforcing it, you need to
I need
enforce it.
clarification now. I don't understand what, I'm sorry, now we're descending into, I don't even understand what we're talking about because I had no idea it was this big of a deal.
Well, here's, when we went to fingertip length, we all posted it I believe John posted on his school board one, finger tablet. We had pictures everywhere of exactly what it meant. When we made this decision, none of us had a visual. None of us. We didn't have a visual of what it was, because literally, I will tell you honestly, I went and bought some capris, and there was a slit just right here, and I'm like, do I buy them or not? Because I mean, literally, it shouldn't be a question, but it is a concern, because if I wore those to school, would a student say, hey, you get to wear the, I mean, it was literally like a half an inch or a quarter inch little, but they couldn't wear a hole that was designed in the pant. So we need just some pictures. We need some visuals to show what is okay and what is not okay. So our 8 campuses are all following the same.
So the staff wants to have hemmed heart cutouts on the capris below the knee. That's okay. I'm just asking,
The
it's
staff
fine.
is 100% fine with any holes below the fingertips, and that is what.
Any holes?
Any holes.
Can I
Okay.
ask you, why not below the knees? Because someone pointed out
We can
that,
do below the knee.
Below the knees, fine.
which would be, what would you recommend in your experience would be better? Because one of you said that some students have really short arms and that they're going to be able to wear holes. If that's so, I mean, we need to know that. So the knees would be better.
That's the problem, is there's no common sense in the way this has been rolled out. Common sense. And there's no respect for the fact that the board made a decision. I mean, when you bring up a handbook for approval and you're making changes to it, or there's been issues that you were highlighting in the course of that discussion, things are going to happen, things are going to change. That's what the board does, is we establish the policies of the district. If there is common sense in the enforcement of this, it's not that big of a deal. But we're not the ones who enforce it. We are the ones that make a policy. It's now in the handbook, it's codified in district policy. There are procedural things that have been done at your schools. If they're not all on the same page, then it's up to the administration to get it on the same page. That's literally the way I see it. What you're saying is that the legislature has to write a letter to the police officer explaining how the law was actually intended to be enforced. That doesn't happen in real life.
No, but in real life, you also have a judicial branch. So if the law is not clear and law enforcement violates the procedure in some way, the person has legal remedies in the courts.
Okay, we haven't violated any procedures
I'm just going on your...
Right. But understand, there is a process in place to bring that back to the board if you feel that you've been treated unfairly in a discipline process.
Right.
There is an appellate process in place in our district. There is a procedure. There is policy. It's
well, the
all
board
there.
is also open to communication, and that was the point I was trying to make, is that I have not, as a board member, received any communication. I've received communication on a lot of issues throughout the past couple of years, but not one letter on this issue
And I wanted
in
to
particular.
personally come tonight just
And I
to have this
appreciate that.
conversation.
And I also understand how hard it is to try and enforce something when there's constantly going to be, no matter what the rule is, somebody pushing the limit around
But I
it.
think if we had clear expectations, and I don't even think all the administrators, because it's not a rule they wanted, it was, this is what we recommended, here's the change. But there was no put in place on how it's enforced across the board.
But I think you're speaking from your school's point of view, from your own personal point of view there when you say administrators, because I've had administrators come up to me from the elementary school saying, we want this.
You know, we just put it in, and now all of a sudden we're debating on getting rid of it. You know, the thing, I was outspoken on the board when I saw this in there, and I would go up to the high school and walk around, and the ripped, ragged, and torn stuff, and I wondered what was going on. For years we had that, we went through this thing before, and that's what kids did. They were sent to me. I used some common sense on dealing with them. but I didn't get rid of the rule because I thought it's no different than if you have a rule on use of language. I always heard that, well, that's the way kids talk to one another, this foul language. Well, you know something? They never talked that way when I was around, because that was the expectation. Now, should we just say, well, that's the way kids talk, and so that's the way they behave, and they're expressing their individualism or whatever? Nonsense. And so all of a sudden, because either someone didn't want to enforce it or whatever, it's taken out. And now you have this issue. And what the best way to decide, to find out if this is working, is over a period of time, chart the dress code violations. If they go south, then there isn't a problem. But you're always going to have some of these come along. But as an administrator, when the board decided this years ago, and I was an assistant principal up there, I used a little common sense. When they were sent to me, if it was obvious, it would be dealt with. Now, you know, if a kid was coming to school and the back of his jeans or her jeans were a little frayed, I'm not going to deal with that. And I sure wouldn't deal with that if I was up in Holbrook or Winslow, where you have a lot of cowboys and you see that all the time. But the administration will, you know, you enforce it, you send them to them, and they use some common sense in the application. But I don't think it's too much of an expectation that we have high standards in all areas for kids. And it's beyond me that the amount of time that this has been here before was decided back in May, and you'd think we were sending a spaceship to Mars.
I just don't want another policy in a handbook that's not being followed, and that's what
I agree with you. And that's every teacher getting in line and doing it. No different than on the tardy policy, the absentee policy, the language policy, all those other things. I agree with you. You know, supervision in the halls during the passing period, I agree with you on every one of those.
Why is it the board's place to decide what's professional?
Why is it your mother's place to decide when you need to be home at night?
But that's not the same thing. This is about clothes.
Well, what I'm saying is, it's a standard. You know, your mother has expectations. We can have expectations.
I know, but everyone's professional is different. Like, this generation's professional might be ripped jeans.
And I think you hit upon it, because the bottom line is that somebody sets a standard. And again, I'll use the work example. At work, you have you know, if you're at McDonald's, you've got a corporate board and an HR department that decides what's right to wear. If you're at my office, myself and my wife, who own the business, actually decide what's correct to wear while you're at work. I've lost employees over dress at my office. I've gotten into a discussion with one of them, and he just looked up at me and he said, well, I'm not going to go do it. I'm going to give you notice. And I'm like, okay. In the real world, when you don't follow the dress code, there are much more dire consequences than a detention and changing your clothes. And there are people who make these decisions on what's right and what's wrong, whether it's a board elected by the public, or by a school administrator, or by your parents, or by your boss at work. There are people that make rules.
I'm just telling you how, because I have not met one student in the high school that has agreed with this. That's why there's so much backlash on Facebook, everywhere else. I know you said you didn't get a written, I sent an email, but...
To the board?
Yeah, to John.
Mm-hmm. Oh.
But, yeah. So if I can interject a little bit, right now, I suspect that much of this discussion will also occur next week in the public meeting, that's the official board meeting. In terms of what our policy says, it does say that dress should be clean, neat, appropriate, in a material and style for a business-like educational atmosphere. And it is the purview of the board because they are setting the policy for education and the educational atmosphere that in many areas, including student dress, student behavior, academic expectations, all of those areas, it's under the purview of the board to set the policy in those areas. And so the board determines what dress reflects a business-like educational atmosphere, which is a little different from professionalism. I know professionals come up, but that's not really the term that's in the policy. The other thing I would like to comment on is as a result of the complaint that we received this year, each principal was sent an email defining a whole because we felt that that needed to be clarified. And at this point in time, I don't think there's a lack of understanding. The question would be interpretation of enforcement. So where I made some notes is mesh a whole or is lace a whole or whatever. Those are some areas to clarify.
And
but the issue,
designer holes.
And well, yeah, they're designed, the rips and frays, everything else. That was all clarified. I think
things.
The issue for, and I would, if I may respond, Mr. Rooney, to some of your comments there, discretion for each principal may look different. And unfortunately, when we do talk about, we have an issue in if one principal uses their discretion to allow something that another principal does not, then we have another whole series of things that come up. And so I have asked the principals to say, listen, it's solid fabric, whether they're shorts, capris, Bermuda shorts, whatever they are, they're solid fabric, no holes. The standard reads appropriately hemmed, and that they need to follow that standard. That too much discretion in that area. I mean, obviously, if you've walked on the back of your jeans because they're a little bit long, that is not the same thing as the entire hem being free, etc. And so, just to be aware that Mr. Mazin is saying that it's up to the administration then to set the enforcement. We have asked the administration to enforce that to the strict. Because unfortunately, as soon as we start making it, well, this is okay, but now this isn't, and it becomes very subjective. And unfortunately, we have a lot of people who, and excuse me if this sounds insulting, but who want to play that game. Well, so-and-so lets it happen, but you won't. And that may or may not be the case, but it's very difficult to put all of your principals on the same page.
Right.
I would compare it to, when the tardy bell rings. Well, if I get into the room while it's ringing in my tardy, if I'm 1 second after in my tardy, we start getting into those kinds of degrees of, and it's much easier to enforce and just say, this is the rule, and please enforce it. So that is what we have said from the administrative level.
Does the board give guidance to the administrators on discipline, like what the consequences are for it? No. Okay, so it's up to each administrator of each school to decide.
Well, the board doesn't give guidance to any administrators except for the superintendent.
Although all of those things are in policy and are in the handbooks that come forward to the board for approval. So ultimately, the board has approved all of those plans, yes.
Okay, so if you prescribe, a 15-minute detention for a dress code violation, then the board signs off on it. Am I understanding that correctly?
Good.
And I'm throwing that as an example. I don't know.
Right. Each handbook will have a discretion of what the consequences could be for an offense. So then so for example, for a dress code, you might get between 1 and 4 hours of detention. So it would be up to
4 hours of detention. 2 hours.
Sure. As an example, yes.
Okay. That is an example, or that is what the policy is?
I don't know if it's exactly that.
Detention for the first infraction.
But there's typically in the discipline procedures, there's a range within which administrators can determine where that particular violation fits. So,
yeah. And all of the students and all of the parents sign the handbook that they've read and understand it. So, and I know that everybody doesn't read and everybody doesn't understand it, just like the terms and services that we check off on everything that we don't realize what we're agreeing to. But nevertheless, it is, we go through the arduous task of going through it, and it is the responsibility of the parent and I would say even the student as soon as they can read for their appropriate grade level to start reading about the expectation. So it shouldn't be, none of it should be a surprise to anybody.
They know the handbook like the back of their hand.
Yeah, I bet they do because they're looking for,
Let you know.
I mean, it's normal for kids to look for ways around the handbook, which is why we thought we clarified it very specifically. I understand what you're saying. I appreciate that you have enforced it and don't envy you at all for that.
As a further follow-up, if a administrator were to say, well, I know I'm supposed to give a 2-hour violation for a first-time dress code offense, but I don't think the punishment fits the crime, so I'm not going to do 2 hours, would that employee be in violation of their employee contract?
That's not really something that we're going to take a hypothetical from the audience on. I don't think that's something that we should be answering in an open session.
Is that happening?
I'm trying to get a better sense of how the policy is enforced for employees.
I think if you wanted to have a conversation on that, the Superintendent Sire can make herself available.
Are we ready for 6.7?
I don't know. I think we got another hour. The paper just got here. Let's rehash it.
Is the horse dead yet?
6.7 is a placeholder. Mrs. Cohen had requested that we have a discussion about curriculum on the next agenda, which is this agenda that we're talking about now. I did include on the work session agenda for after the review of this agenda, a discussion on the elementary school curriculum, which was the original request, so that we would have a little bit more clarification on what to include in the agenda item. And so this one isn't fleshed out. It's awaiting discussion on number 4 of today's agenda. And then the final item, 6.8, is our vouchers and student activity funds.
So are we going to discuss that now or no?
Yes, as soon as we're done.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
Any questions on the vouchers? If you do look through on the informational items, educational services has some information. In our personnel report, we have the exit survey data from last year for the board's review, and then several areas that are updates for special services.
So at the next board meeting, it's just going to, just a report on the AC merit scores.
Yes. I'm sorry, I actually skipped over that part of the agenda. Thank you, Mrs. Fox, for bringing that up. In the recognition of visitors on next week's agenda, we have our recognition of the Little Knights Preschool. We will have an Employee Benefit Trust update, and we will have a report on our AC merit scores.
Ready for item 4, discussion on elementary schools curriculum.
So in the backup documentation on the yellow agenda, I did provide for the board, and it's showing on the screen. This is just as a beginning point. These are the adopted textbooks that we are currently utilizing in our elementary schools. And on, excuse me, each of the grade levels, it indicates the subject, the title of the adoption, the publisher, and the edition that we have currently in place. So I would like to share that K through 3, we have just redone our entire training, and as you may recall from last year, updated all of our materials on the Reading Horizons Discovery Phonics. So that is completely consistent K 3 and up to date on that.
I don't have a copy. Okay. Discovery Phonics. So, Is that where you're stopping?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So, Discovery Phonics K-3, and this is you've pulled together from all the schools?
This is from each of the schools, what we have adopted as a board as the core curriculum.
Okay.
Okay, so this isn't any of the supplemental materials, this is simply what are our core texts that we currently have adopted.
Okay. So, I've heard some concerns from parents and administrators about the lack of curriculum and then also the call, oh, she's gone. Is it Mrs. Peterson? She had done the call to public about having to purchase curriculum online, so this was a concern for me. And we have a lot of curriculum that's not listed in the core from around the district, just from all the stuff that I was sent during the development of the curriculum committee.
Right.
So that's different than the core that has been adopted.
Yes.
Okay. So has there been any discussion about how to purchase curriculum for kindergarten through 6th grade? What we would use, what that process would look like?
Actually, not at this point. What we've done is started with the discussion around the high school.
Okay. Right.
And then what we did for K-8 initially is looking at the standards. And we had talked with the board about purchasing the Crane resource, which is actually not a curriculum. So I don't want to, they call it a curriculum, but it is not a curriculum. What it is a central location where all of the standards are located. There's a pacing guide. There are breakdown of, I'm not coming up with the language that I need right now, but the breakdown of all the skills that are needed in order for a student to understand the standard, to be taught the standard. And then there are some suggested resources for those standards and some suggested lessons for those standards. But the standards are what we expect our students to learn. These are the curricular resources that the district has purchased in order for teachers to teach those standards.
Right. And so the Crane, even though there are some suggestions, that's just the pacing guide that you should be able to use whatever resource material that you want and the pacing guide, or no?
Whatever resource material that you want.
Well, not you want, that's approved, that we have. I'm saying it doesn't have to be a specific resource. It doesn't have to be what's listed
Correct.
In Crane.
That is correct.
Okay, that's...
The resources that we have are, while they are a little dated, they have the content in there that could be utilized to teach the standard.
Okay. And then we hear that a lot about, it's dated, it's old. But I wonder why that matters in most cases. I know I've only come across a few cases where that would really matter if you're just teaching a standard. Why does it have to be new information?
It depends on the subject area. And so, for example, this is probably not even a real example, but there could be, for example, that there's a different sequencing now in the teaching mathematics. So perhaps the textbook that we have currently purchased is no longer covers that skill that's now included in that grade level. Right now, our adopted standards are in language arts and mathematics, and so there really shouldn't be that many exceptions to that. Those would occur more as you get into the upper grade levels.
Sure.
But I think the majority of the issue is that the support materials that go with student text are designed for an earlier set of standards and an earlier level of rigor than what our current standards expect. So basically, the issue with materials is not so much that there's not a story that I can teach. It would be all of the planning that needs to occur for me to have the strategies to teach that standard in terms of developing the questions, developing assessment, developing assignments, those kinds of things. So the work that's involved. And so in curricular adoptions, typically the teacher support materials that are more current are also more up to date and aligned with the level of rigor that's expected for students too.
And then it also provides all those tools,
yes,
so that the teacher doesn't have to do them themselves.
Exactly, yes.
Okay, so what you're giving up in autonomy over what you're teaching, you're gaining in resources, so you don't have to do that planning and making up the questions and the assessments or whatever. And so it doesn't have to be new and relevant, but the teacher does have to be able to make the lesson plan or to make, the test questions or whatever, however they're going to assess.
Correct. So the content, the standard is a skill, and the curriculum will be the content that's used to teach that skill. Now, there are some areas, and I would say science particularly, where the actual body of knowledge has changed.
Right.
And so there are some things that are no longer current in our science textbooks. That's probably the one that's the most critical in terms of the up-to-date.
And those are going before the state board
Right. So
on the 24th.
we are pretty much nationwide science standards. Once they're adopted, then they'll start looking at materials. And so the pattern and the issue that maybe is part of your question, nationwide textbooks are developed based on what they're going to sell. And so at the national level, the majority of states who have adopted Common Core standards, those would be the alignment for those textbooks. And so that is, you will seldom find one that's identified specific to Arizona standards, even though our Arizona standards have been revised, because there's just not a market for that. And so regardless of the text that we purchase, there will be some things that will not align with Arizona standards.
Right.
I have a question. What materials are we using for grammar and writing, and what materials for handwriting?
Can I call on Brad for that one, because he has a little bit more specific.
Well, the high school level,
Elementary.
Okay, the elementary level, where we actually developed a scope and sequence for grammar for K-6, and that has, teachers have been trained on that process. They have a resource, a reference they can look at that guides them through each of the sequences of the grammar piece.
Do they have to run off worksheets, or how does that work? So what do the students use to practice?
Well, there's material that comes
okay.
with that, yes.
And handwriting, what do we use for handwriting?
We've had a discussion about that. We have an agreement. I would like to say, Christina, are you open to your suggestion that we had two things going on, one at Oregon, and we have some other things in another school, so I'm going to defer to her on.
For the handwriting piece, it's difficult because we have one school in our district that uses modern print, which is Denilian, and all other 5 elementary schools use stick and ball, if you want to call it that, traditional print. But what we spoke about is we all were just trained in intensive phonics. We were retrained, and all of the materials that you can print out to practice handwriting from that program are traditional print, but we are not unified at this time.
Have we ever done a study going to schools and asking for cursive samples that students have written and comparing and seeing whether Denilian is better or doesn't make a difference, or what? Because I know it's a controversial subject.
I taught at Oro Grande for 13 years, so I taught Denilian for 13 years to first graders. And our reasoning for staying with it was because it made the transition to cursive in 3rd grade easier. That is why it is.
In my opinion, when I went to Oro Grande, I was shocked at how well the handwriting, the cursive handwriting of the students. I'd never seen that. I'd been at Starline, Nautilus, and Smoke Tree. I couldn't believe. I said, how did you accomplish this? And I had nothing else to attribute it to but Denilian. But that's just my observation.
To answer your question, we have not done a comparison at this
point. What's the difference, Denilian and what? I'm sorry.
Denilian has it has tails on everything. Your K looks like a cursive K with minus the loop. So it's like
but what was the term for the
stick and ball?
So stick and yeah.
Like literally, that's
like
what it's
this.
called. Stick. If I go
Traditional and modern.
are now the terms, but it used to be stick and ball and Denilian, so.
Okay.
You would
keep
probably
thinking
And
have-
was stick and ball modern?
No.
Oh, traditional.
Whatever you were taught was probably stick and ball when you were taught to print.
I have a quasi-print handwriting, depending on my mood.
The other piece of Denilian, which like as a reading teacher that I appreciate, is you teach students to write from top to bottom, left to right. And the stroke of their pen is literally from top to bottom, left to right. In stick and ball, you make the C, you raise your pencil, you go to the top, you draw your line, there's a disconnect, so their C looks like a C and an L if it's not written properly. So there's certain, I don't want to get in that discussion, but it is different. There is a different philosophy. And there is a person at Oro Grande that is passionate, and it's not going away until that person is no longer with that school, I'm going to say, like,
Okay, so
there's a passion there still of why. it's-
for the modern or for the
modern,
traditional?
For the modern.
For the modern. Denilian. Got it.
I keep thinking fighter jet when I hear stick and ball. Just my thought.
So what's
So the question was on the grammar and then the writing program, not handwriting, but actually writing, right?
Well, the writing program really doesn't exist. It's been, Thinking Maps was one of the resources we looked at to address that issue. Trying to get teachers to take the maps and then take writing off the maps as a guide. There's been a variety of options available to teachers, though, at each site. I mean, there's this Foursquare, there's a few other things that are used to teach basic paragraph structure, a complete sentence, etc. But there's really no specific resource that we've targeted right now.
What about Right to the Future?
That would be the Thinking Maps piece.
We used to have a really good program created by a retired teacher named Carlene Bishop called Pause. It's paragraph about
That's another one.
an expository, all of the different types of expository writing. The students learned those as they went up, and they had a lot of exemplars that they would, they'd write a paragraph, and then they would go look at a good model and judge themselves how well they had done and that kind of thing. So I'd love to see that one brought back. It was very effective. That didn't cost any money.
Yeah, there are resources available, but it would be a decision on what is our real core there.
In our current grammar program, the only resource that the only cost aside from being trained was that we each have one manual. But as far as student materials, we create them ourselves. The students are writing in notebooks. Every teacher we create anchor charts, so yes, that takes time to create that anchor chart, but it's standard from classroom to classroom. But down Pitfall, which I've shared with Brad, is not every teacher is trained in that program. So because we have such high transition or turnover, if a teacher in your grade level has not been trained, it's hard for them to pick up how to teach the grammar in that same way. That's our one.
I'm sorry, Christina, which program?
The grammar.
It's painless grammar.
Painless grammar, thank you.
Our turnover's gotten better though. Okay. Let's check.
We're working on that.
Kathy, with
So I'm-
Pause, oh, sorry. The
Oh, I was
Pause,
go-
did that go with 6th traits?
Pause came first, and then I think we sort of segued into sixth grade.
Which has moved away. Right, we don't do 6th traits.
Okay.
So are we able to see the scope and sequence of the grammar? And I'm going to go look up Denilian and stickball.
Denilian's better.
Ball stick.
So are we, when we have our board meeting, are we going to discuss, because we had a district curriculum committee, even though we started with
Right.
the high school, the committee was meant for
Right.
K-12. We just we didn't start with K, we started with,
That's correct.
9 through 12. So will we be discussing that at a minimum, maybe our resources, and what we're looking to do in order to make sure that we have the core?
So yes.
Okay.
But we haven't planned for that formal discussion. And so I think having this agendized for the board meeting and then asking, as the board directs the curriculum committee, and that would be appropriate to have that discussion about reconvening that committee. I'll stop there. My question would be, what would you like included for the agenda? So for example, you just mentioned about the grammar scope and sequence, but there were some other things that for the discussion with the board on curriculum that you would like to see.
Well, I would just like to see a comprehensive, and this isn't comprehensive, this is the core, I understand that, but a comprehensive look at what we have currently. And all I have to look, I've never seen a scope and sequence. We heard a presentation about the crane, but I've never seen the crane, so I don't know what that actually looks like as a resource. And I know that resources are a big problem. I'm trying to understand why, because none of it seems like rocket science, unless of course you're moving the goalpost for measurement every couple years. That's where I see maybe our issue is, or what we're suffering from.
Can I give a possible answer to that very good question? The rule is what gets
tested gets taught.
I
get that.
And with the state standards, they're not tested in writing. They're not tested. They haven't been tested in science. I mean, it's been reading, math, and writing itself of the paragraphs or essays or whatever. And so as those topics have gotten dropped off, and we haven't had resources, and so without the money coming in to keep up with the resources, if no one's teaching them because they're not being tested, I mean, it's been a double-edged sword because of the state standard being tested. So I think that that's what's happened. I saw that happen when I was in the district, and it's just where we are. It's the evil state standards, or no, the evil testing. It's the evil testing that has come to no good, in my opinion.
I wouldn't disagree that a lot of what we do with testing is incorrect. But getting back to how you teach a child, how you resource against a curriculum, and how you unpack to a standard, I think it's something that we should be looking at, and how are we, and again, this gets back to that core of how do you load out a classroom? What is a core thing for that classroom? What does the district provide? And so this is an exercise I think worth having. Will we get somewhere where we're going to spend a bunch of money and plow it into the elementary schools with resource material? Maybe not, but it would be an interesting thing to explore and to see where it goes. And if we don't do it now, it's something with DA money coming back online that we can certainly plan for the future.
I'm just wondering, as far as the agenda item goes, it looks like that this would be a pretty big thing to pull together by next Tuesday. I'm wondering if, we've got, we'll have people here about the dress code, and that'll take a long time. And then we're going to have the report on AZ Merit. It looks like it's going to be a really long board meeting. What would you think of putting this on another?
Can I make a suggestion in that? I think that the first item in this is to task the curriculum committee. And maybe that's the agenda item we have.
Do we need to do that formally on the agenda item?
Well, I think we do, and because when we did the curriculum committee last time, first we started with, we had to go through the philosophy, and then we put the committee together, but the committee didn't really consist of what I had thought of when I was president and created the committee. That's not what it represented. So I would like to make sure that when we do this for K through 6, that it looks different than it looked, or at least more. You have something on your mind, I could tell.
No,
Oh.
I'm not sure what that looks like, that's all.
Oh, there was only one parent on the curriculum committee for high school. And while it may be more difficult, I understand at a high school level for a curriculum committee, for an elementary level, it seems like we could have more participation from the parents that are involved in, that are concerned, because I did have a lot of concerned parents about the lack of curriculum. I think it was I can't remember what school committee. There's
From the
a few.
the comprehensive needs assessment.
Thank you, yes. So that was an issue. So maybe we could have.
And the thing for that was mostly the age of the curriculum and the fact that, those texts often go out of print.
Right.
And so that's another issue. So, can I leave the agenda item that it's discussion and possible action regarding district curriculum?
Yes.
And then provide maybe some of the information that you've asked for? I won't have it all put together.
Well, I think we have it all.
We do in that one spreadsheet.
I mean, there's multiple spreadsheets. We've got novel lists, and I've scoured the L drive over the past year, pulling anything curriculum related. So I know that there's multiple lists here, but some of them are duplications.
I don't think that we need to have anything other than the discussion of possible action. And I think we task the curriculum committee, we then bring information to the curriculum committee and move it on.
Here's my concern, just so I can make sense at some level.
Sure.
If teachers are purchasing curriculum offline, that's what prompted this discussion in the short term, because that's an issue. As well as when we had the adoption for the ELA book in high school, a teacher approached me afterwards. We discussed, and she told me, or no, it was during the actual meeting, where she was using a book that was not on the list of novels. Again, this is a concern because these are all curriculum pieces. So I'm trying to figure out how we go about, not that you have to have it all done and boxed with a bow on it, but how do we go about making sure that we have everything listed that we do have, so that when the curriculum committee meets, we actually know what we have access to and what that looks like. So I'd be happy to go in and log ISBN numbers in a list, if that would be helpful, from school to school. I don't know where all this stuff is. I know we have a lot of old resources, but what is it? I know it's not being used. It could be. And if it's not going to be used, how do we dispose of it and make room? So, does that make it clear?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Yes. I have mine at home, sorry. I didn't even realize it was attached to the back of that sheet.
So are we done with 4?
Do you want to go?
No, I'm asking. It seemed like we had hit the point of pause.
It's only been 3 hours.
We're fine. I'll get my second one. Updates and announcements? Anything from the board? I have one. Went to the law conference. A group of us did. Mrs. Cox, Superintendent Sire, Ms. Festadego, and Mrs. Walter, and myself all went down and had a great time. We had a good session on school safety. The keynote speaker was very good, very well done on his autistic child and the communication things with his autistic child. I thought that was fascinating that he had a child who related very well to Disney movies and the characters in there, and if you talk to him in character, he would respond in character. It was very interesting. We finished that off. I stayed Saturday for an extra day. Went to the delegate assembly. That was very interesting. It's kind of a controlled chaos in there. Parliamentarian got challenged more than once in the process, and I was actually successful in amending one of the legislative priorities, and that was on testing and how it relates to teacher reviews and also class letter grade or school letter grades and so on. Setting it so that we really should only be measuring year-over-year student achievement and not the rest of it. It really, what you're doing in the test is you're sending a test into a school. There's no stakes. The kids basically, you ask any of the kids, it's okay, abracadabra, here we go, fill in the blanks. And we judge our schools by it. We judge our teachers by it. It doesn't make any difference on graduation. It doesn't mean any difference in their grades. And so it's really a disservice when you start trying to say that, well, we're going to judge the quality of the school or the quality of the teacher based on that test. So that was,
Thank you.
That was
So
interesting.
that was a change to ASBA's position statement, not necessarily a change to the
Right.
law.
Right.
No, I know that hurdle is at the state board.
Right, but the word shall appeared in there somewhere, so that was kind of fun.
I just want to be clear for the audience that.
So.
It's a good start, thank you.
So, and you're all invited back so we can talk more about pants and rips and among other things. And that'll be on September 18th at 6 o'clock. That's 1 week from tonight at 6 p.m. And with that, I will entertain a motion to go home.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Pat Rooney?
Yes.
Kathy Cox?
Yes.
Nicole Cohen?
Yes.
John Maston?
Yes, we are adjourned.